Good evening, everyone. Please stand for the pledge and remain standing. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I'll have a moment of silence, please.
Way to do it.
Thank you all. Roll call.
Mayor Dickey,
Here.
Vice Mayor Spellich,
Present.
Councilmember McMahon, here. Councilmember Charno,
Present.
Councilmember Magazine, here. Councilmember Friedel,
Present.
Councilmember Grzybowski.
Present. Thank you. Glad you're all here. We have our reports by town manager, council members, and mayor. Grady?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I'm pleased to introduce tonight to our new town engineer, if Mr. Janover can come up to the podium and say hi. Our town engineer just started last week. He previously worked for the city of Avondale. Was it 8 years? 6 years?
6 years.
6 years. He has quite a bit of municipal experience, having worked in New York as well as out here, and has a lot of the relationships that we have with Maricopa County Association of Governments and other jurisdictions. So we're very pleased to have Mr. Janover work for the town as our town engineer. And I'll turn it over.
Thank you, Grady. Mayor and Council. Hi, how are you? I just want to say that I'm so excited to become part of the Fountain Hills team and family. And in the brief time that I've been here already, just the depth of the character of the people that are here on the team is just immense. And immense technical ability, and I'm just so excited to be part of it. So I would just like to say that I will commit to keeping this town beautiful and safe for our citizens and visitors. And I'm just so excited to be here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Did you say we were a bunch of characters?
He's got that right.
Yeah, you know, the new guy just doesn't have it quite right. But, and then Mayor, Council, just one more thing. As you're aware, you know, the last council meeting, we were talking quite a bit about the state legislature's budget package, which contains the flat tax. We were able to get a very, I think, a well-written letter, kind of taking a lot of the information that we have here unique to our town and the impact that will have if that goes through. We sent to the District 23 representatives, Kavanaugh, Chaplick, and then also Senator Ugenti Rita on Friday. And then yesterday, through the help of Angela, we were able to get the letter sent off to the entire House and also the Senate. We've heard back from a few, and then most of the time you don't really hear back, but we've heard from a handful that they supported our concerns, and then we've heard only one that said that he was still very firmly in support of the proposal as presented. So anyways, just want to let you know we're going to continue to watch and track that, and hopefully it doesn't seem like they have a majority necessarily. They have maybe a plurality. So I think that was maybe Jerry.
Jerry, would you like to report?
I have nothing right now.
Great. I'm sorry, we just heard something. So anyways, we're going to continue to track this, and we'll provide updates to the council. I know we have a legislative item, so maybe we could talk a little bit more about that when we get to that item.
Thank you. I think Councilwoman McMahon?
Yes, I want to let everybody know that I attended the MAG Economic Council meeting. There were some interesting presenters, but one of them was Audrey Thomas of MAG, and she gave a great presentation on MAG's new transportation plan. And if any of you are interested, it's available on MAG's website. It's really a good presentation. And Mayor Dickey and I also attended the Arizona Town Hall Homeless Forum for elected officials. And Julie Silas of Home Base was one of the presenters. She's done a lot of research, and she found that there were 7,400 people are homeless in our region, which is an 11% increase over prior years, and that more than half of these people are really homeless without shelters. And she feels that as elected officials, we need to band together to help prevent homelessness, address systematic inequities, and strengthen and coordinate addressing homelessness across the region. And to help us in this regard, she's put together a regional homeless strategy portfolio for addressing homelessness, which is going to be out next month. And the launch date will be determined later on in which to put these ideas into best practices. And she emphasized that our leadership is going to be really important in helping all this get done and have everybody collectively work together to solve homelessness, or at least address it in a more effective manner. So thank you.
Well, I have a Valley Metro meeting on Thursday, so I can report on that at our next get-together. And then I was at some theater function the other night, but I'll let the mayor handle that one.
I attended two things over the past couple of weeks, one of which was the One League call about the legislative update, and the other was a GPEC call, which I didn't really know what I was getting into when I signed up for it, but it ended up being really interesting. It was about the marketing, two of the great marketing campaigns that they've done to help mostly California people find Phoenix and be excited about it, whether you are a work-at-home person to move out of the state or a business to move out of the state. And it was really very interesting. Great ideas. It was kind of exciting.
Great, thank you so much. The first thing I want to say is for the next several meetings, we have a lot to do before we break for the summer. So let's all be patient with each other, but I know that a lot of the things that we started, signs and such, are things that we're going to try to wrap up before we are off for the summer. So keep that in mind. We're going to have, I went to a time capsule packing party at the chair of the 50th committee, Sandy Ursini's house. I didn't do anything but eat. I didn't do any helping, but I want to thank my husband Jim and then Brent Cruikshank. They did all the work, and Sandy's husband, and we're going to bury it before our next meeting, 5/4, right, May 4th, out at Centennial Circle. And again, just thanks for everybody, not only from the staff and everybody who's been working on it, but all the organizations that gathered stuff up so that we could put it in there and open it in 25 years. We'll be there, right? I went to a really cute thing. It was a dedication of the second Little Free Library, held by the Four Peaks chapter of the DAR. It was over at the Four Peaks Park. It was really nice. A cool thing. It's a small little house that they have the books in, and this one had a copper roof on it, so the guys that made it spoke. It was really neat, and they're going to do one more too, right, Rachel? Yeah, I think so. At Golden Eagle.
We're in the park.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So, it's over by the. It's where the. Why am I forgetting the name of the word? Where you have the picnics.
Ramada?
The Ramada, yeah, yeah. We had the Festival of Arts and Crafts, and we had the Music Fest. I didn't get to go. I just kind of drove through, but it looked like a lot of fun. I saw a lot of videos on Facebook and all. Enrique Melendez, who's a former council person and the consul to El Salvador, brought the consul of the United Kingdom, Hank Marshall, to Town Hall to do a little tour, and I met him, and it was very, very nice, and I appreciated that he brought him over. Thanks again to all of you and our staff for our work study session on the budget, which the reports were very clear, and it really helped set the table for us for the next couple of meetings. I think we'll be able to kind of breeze through that. I went to a webinar called Closing Out the Pandemic by some of the state and other healthcare professionals. It's very encouraging. It gives me the opportunity to mention, I looked up on our county website, right now in Fountain Hills, we're going to have, thanks to our chief, my Moderna vaccine May 1st and June 5th at the community center. I checked before, and there were 340 appointments still up there. So I think that there's an opportunity for like some of the younger people. And the reason I say younger people is because if you look on the other website, 86% of those older than 65 older in Fountain Hills have had at least one dose.
Read that again.
86%. So this is the one dose, of course, but it's 61% of everybody over 18. 86% of those older than 65. So we're really, really on our way. I'm, you know, it's just making everybody start to emerge, as you saw with the theater. We had the Folly show where they had several groups, the Women's Club and Fountain View Village and the Chamber, Kiwanis, of course, Rotary clubs, school board people and educators, teachers, the realtors, civic association. So it reminded me of what we used to do in the old days.
You even mentioned the council.
Well, you're not letting me, but anyway, that was the, finale, whatever.
Oh,
We were the finale, actually. But it was just reminding me, the theaters, we've been doing this for 35 years, and the way we used to do the 4th of July, and just all of these things that were just really, really good for the community. And I think they made a little joke about how they're not the community theater anymore. They're the Fountain Hills Theater, but there was a ton of community involved in that evening. And yes, we had several council people from here today and from our past that were there, and mayors. And it seems to be everybody had a really good time. So I really appreciate that. The Chamber Gala is Friday evening, and the Boys and Girls Club Awards are Saturday. And just take a look at their websites for more information, or if you have any questions, just ask me. Anything else from anybody? Thank you. So our next item, April 22nd is Earth Day, and every year they have a different theme, and this year it's Restore Our Earth. Recently, 10 mayors, and thank you to Bo for doing this, because it was one of those short notice kind of things, but 10 Arizona mayors are joining together to celebrate what they call Earth Day Arizona, which is a new statewide collaboration celebrating the many ways Arizona communities support the earth, with the goal of inspiring residents to take action for Earth Day, and not just in April, but beyond. So there's a video, if you want to take a look at that. After the 22nd, you can take a look at it. It's really nice. And ASU is involved with that, and Nature Conservancy. So I'll read the proclamation on behalf of Earth Day in 2 days. Whereas Earth Day was founded in 1970 and included environmental teachings that educated Americans about environmental and species conservation issues and connected those issues to their health and well-being. And whereas on April 22nd, 1970, 20 million Americans activated a bipartisan spirit that motivated the passing of the Clean Air, Clean Water, and Endangered Species Acts and other groundbreaking environmental laws. And whereas Earth Day 2021 is Restore Our Earth, which focuses on natural processes, emerging green technologies, and innovative thinking that can restore the world's ecosystems. Whereas Restore Our Earth encompasses goals and actions including reforestation, regenerative agriculture, and sustainable food, plastic cleanups, climate literacy, and citizen science. Supporting the health and resilience of communities, we have the ability to make lasting change. Whereas we all need a healthy earth to support our jobs, livelihoods, health, survival, and happiness, a healthy planet is not an option, it's a necessity. And Earth Day is an annual reminder of the need for stewardship, commitments, and sustainability efforts. More than 1 billion people in 192 countries now participate in Earth Day activities each year, making it the largest civic observance in the world. Whereas the town has taken a variety of actions over the years, including community-wide curbside recycling, energy-saving measures, adding solar options, and will continue with water quality improvement, installing electric vehicle charging stations, and creating a more walkable community. Therefore, I, Ginny Dickey, Mayor of Fountain Hills, do hereby proclaim April 22nd, 2021 as Earth Day, Restore Our Earth, and encourage all our citizens, businesses, and institutions to use this day to celebrate and commit to help restore our Earth. Thank you. Thank you, Angela, for getting that together for me. I appreciate it. All right. Next, we have our scheduled public appearances and presentations. First, we have our own Captain Larry Kratzer with our monthly report from MCSO. Thanks for coming, Larry.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the council. It's good to be back and doing the presentation. Today, I was just going to talk a little bit about what MCSO will be doing here in the near future in regards to some community outreach. We haven't been able to do anything in the last year because of COVID. So we're excited to kind of get back out and start rolling out some things that we can do just to continue those communications with the public and have some good communication and some good interaction with the public that's positive in nature. So this Saturday, we are doing the DEA Take Back Day. So MCSO is participating in that locally. We work with the Drug Coalition to make sure that, we've got enough personnel out there and enough resources. So the plan is this Saturday from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. right here in front of Town Hall. We'll use the drive-through area right in front of Town Hall doors. Will be set up for anybody to come and drop off unused or unwanted prescription medication, and we will dispose of that. So it's a pretty quick and convenient way for members of the community to pull up and drop off the medication without having to do paperwork or walk inside the building. We'll help them facilitate getting it dropped off and dispose of it properly, so it's not in our water systems or in the trash or laying around the house for people to get their hands on. So again, that's this Saturday, the 24th, 10 a.m. to 2 o'clock p.m. An event we're working on for late June, and the late June timeframe, it seems it's going to be pretty hot out, but we were approached by members of the community wanting to have MCSO personnel and vehicles come out and kind of do a community outreach event. So we're looking at that. We're trying to put that together right now and planning it. We've talked to fire department. They've given us the verbal that they'd be willing to come out with a couple pieces of their apparatus and participate with us in that event and in partnership. If that moves forward, we'll be sure to work with Bo, with the town, to push information out on that. And then we're seeing an increase in folks approaching us again for neighborhood watch programs. Those are things that we tried to continue the information even through COVID, because that's something that people still could organize even though you couldn't have in-person meetings. For the most part, people were still able to do virtual meetings, but starting a neighborhood watch from the ground up without being able to meet in person is a little challenging. But we've had several people come to us wanting to start a neighborhood watch program. So we're working with them on developing a neighborhood watch program for a couple of areas in town. And then the one that I wanted to speak on that we are pretty excited about, and Vice Mayor Spellich brought this to, he made this recommendation last year before COVID hit, when we were seeing the spike in cases, scams, and people being scammed out of a lot of money. And we saw these gift card scams going on where they'd get phone calls and they would be told to go to a store and buy thousands of dollars in gift cards. So we've been working on a presentation that we could roll out, and again, it just has been hampered by getting out to people in the community to push it out. But we have the presentation ready to go. We've had it ready for some time now. The good thing is we've been able to update it with more recent scams or some, more that are trends lately. And our detectives reached out to some of the local banks in town first to see if they'd be willing to partner with us and go out to, when we hold these community events, to speak with us together from their perspective compared to law enforcement's perspective of what they're seeing and how people can avoid being a victim. So what we're going to start doing, like kind of our phase one, the date's tentative, but we're looking at a May 20th date. We've been in conversation with the Fountain View Village. They wanted us to come out and talk to their residents and start with that presentation, talking to their residents about scams and ways to avoid being taken victim and things to look for. So the plan, and we have 2 banks on board right now here in town that are going to work with us on that day, and a couple of the others said they'd be interested. We're just waiting to see if they're available and willing to come out with that day and talk to the residents about scams. So we'll talk to the residents about ways, obviously, to avoid being scammed, what to look for, some of the things that they can, some telltale signs that it is a scam. And then the phase 2 that we're going to roll out is then working with some of the local stores like Bash's, Safeway, some of the other stores that carry the gift cards, where if they get a victim who comes in unknowing and tries to purchase thousands of dollars in gift cards, maybe if that cashier identifies it as a potential scam that they're being the victim of, they might be able to intervene to some level and maybe notify them, alert them, and, you know, if need be, contact and alert law enforcement. So those are some of the things that we have coming up. If there's any questions about those things or other current events in town that you'd like me to speak to, I can definitely address those. But we wanted to push out some information about what we have coming up in the future.
Thank you. Any questions? Councilman?
Not with regard to what you have announced, and please don't take this as a criticism of you or the police force, but I'm seeing an uptick in complaints about speeding, and I'm sure seeing it myself. And so my question is, how many police do we have out on the street at any one time?
Any one given time, it's typically 3 to 4 here in the town of Fountain Hills. It's typically more around 3. So the fourth body is usually in town, but sometimes spends a lot of time in the Rio Verde, McDowell Mountain Park area or the Goldfield Ranch, depending on calls for service. But majority of that time, when there's a fourth body, they're spending their time in town. So there's not an abundance of patrol deputies at every corner of town running traffic or even within the corridors. But when there's not calls for service and there's downtime, the deputies are very active in running, traffic enforcement.
Yeah, there's only so much you can do, and I understand that. Have you seen an increase in the number of citations?
The number of
The last time you were here, we did see a significant increase.
Yeah, the number of citations have pretty much remained steady over the last 2-3 months. So there's not been a drastic increase, but there's not been a decline either. So it's always the balance of calls for service versus downtime for deputies to actually do the traffic enforcement. We do have a deputy who a majority of his work week is dedicated to traffic enforcement. You may have seen him. His vehicles, they call it ghost stripe. So it is marked, but it's very dull marked. So it reflects really bright with lights. But if you see it in the daytime, it almost looks like, maybe someone peeled the tape off the car or the markings, and there's some remnants of markings. But pretty much his main goal is to do traffic enforcement, and we spread him pretty thin on requests from the public and the corridors, and people who email us asking for traffic enforcement in certain areas.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Cap, thanks for following through on that. I really appreciate it. I think it's going to help the residents. Once you fine-tune this presentation, if there's a way that it could be videoed so that it could possibly be placed on public access TV, and if it could be somewhere on our town website that we could drive people to watch it. When these people become aware of these scams, I think we're going to see a decrease in them happening. It's really helped, at least back in Chicago, when we had the financial crime unit reach out to banks. There was a lot of fraud stopped because people didn't know, that they were being taken advantage of. So thanks for the great follow-up on that. And I would just like to, of course, not your first presentation or your second one, but when you guys feel comfortable, to have it taped and make it available to everybody. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Vice Mayor. I think that's a great idea. I was actually, part of my notes were to talk about maybe putting the presentation at least on the town's website, working with Bo. But I think that's probably a better idea to videotape the presentation, maybe with some questions and answers from people. I mean, if they don't mind being filmed, if we give them that ahead of time to let them know. But yeah, I think that's a great idea. We can work at doing that.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Captain, we had that swatting incident out here a week or two ago, whenever that was, and I know there was one TV report, and I know there was some chatter on Facebook as well, but I was talking about the cost of the event, and it almost made it sound like the town was going to be billed for for covering all of that. And I don't know if you or Grady want to cover that, but I mean, that's obviously not the case. And I just want to clarify that,
Yeah,
that's all part of our contract as far as your response to incidents out here, so.
yeah, good question, Councilmember Charno. And yeah, I did do a sit down. It was a virtual interview with Channel 12 News, and I think they ran a few segments about the incident. And it was a difficult question. I wasn't really prepared for the question about what kind of costs that would ensue. And I threw a number out there and said, "Don't quote me on that." And I saw in there, and I'm not getting on the reporter at all. The 10,000 number kind of stuck, and I pulled that out of thin air. I have no idea what an incident like that might cost. Yeah, so I don't know that 10,000 was even remotely close. I mean, maybe it was, maybe it's not. But no, just for clarification, and we've had plenty of conversations with MCSO's finance director, and I think there is still some confusion to this day on what the town is billed for in the contract. And it's my understanding, and I've tried to make sure I understood this very thoroughly. I've had the conversation numerous times with Suzanne Bayer, and for SWAT and the related and those type of resources that come with MCSO, those are typically not billed man hours to the town of Fountain Hills. Now, what Fountain Hills would see in terms of being back billed for the staffing would be our deputies that are assigned to Fountain Hills that day may have been scheduled to be off at 3 p.m., but would have had to stay over till 5 or 6 p.m. to deal with the situation, write the reports. Those would be things that the town would accrue the cost of. But aviation, the helicopter fuel, the helicopter being out, those pilots, the SWAT team coming out, the equipment that came out, those are not things that the town is going to be billed for. So the question, what would it cost taxpayers? To me, that question, that was in generally speaking, taxpayers of Maricopa County, not Fountain Hills residents. So yeah, I don't believe that the town will be on the.
And just to echo that, that has been the case in the past. You probably recall that when we had a presidential candidate here several years ago, we had a huge contingent of MCSO, helicopter support, SWAT folks, plus other agencies. And the way that it works with our intergovernmental agreement with MCSO is that those are actually like an ongoing cost that MCSO is paying for. Those SWAT members are always there on their payroll, whether they're deployed or not. And so it always shows up on their side of the ledger. Same thing with the helicopters. But if we're using excessive fuel or more than what they normally would have used in a normal day, then we'll pay for those additional costs over and above that. But I think that the captain did a great job kind of explaining that to us. And in the future, he may want to be a little bit more cautious to give a response back to the news media. So, but that's not his job. That's not his role to be the PIO for the MCSO.
Thank you. And again, I mean, that day, you don't know nothing's happening until you know nothing's happening. So we really appreciate all of the, your work and your service because, it's very tense. You don't know what it is, and you guys are there for us, and we appreciate that. Alan, the Pedestrian and Traffic Safety Committee is meeting on the 12th, and we have had kind of an uptick in people about speeding, and I agree with you, I've seen it. So we'll probably be discussing that again for seeing if there's any other options. We have the signs, we've got the increased enforcement, and maybe we'll have to look at our tools and see if there's anything else we can do for that. The other question I had was about the drug, turning in your old pharmacy stuff. Do you do that with liquid too? Like if someone has cough medicine or something like that?
Yes, they'll take any of those things. I think my memory serves me correctly. If someone's trying to turn in, use syringes, that might be problematic. But yeah, liquid medication is something that's accepted.
Okay, that's good.
Keep it in the bottle.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions for the captain? Thank you so much,
Thank you.
as always. Next up, we have a presentation by Tourism Marketing Effects for 2020 through 21. And James Smith is here. Grady, do you have anything to start us off?
Mayor and Council, this item's on at the request of the council. Recall, there were some questions that came up at a council meeting not long ago, and I think even at the retreat there were some questions about economic development activities. So The Economic Development Director, James Smith, is going to give you an overview of the marketing efforts in the past year. And he and then also Amanda Straight, our Economic Development Analyst, are here answer any questions after he gives you this brief presentation.
Great. Thanks, Mayor and Council, for the opportunity. I know there were some questions at the retreat about some of the efforts that we've done, and glad to have an opportunity to kind of give you an update. So yeah, that was. Hope you guys were watching. All right, I'm gonna slow down now. Okay. So, just to give you an idea of kind of what some of the core messaging has been over the last year, we've really tried to focus on those people who are coming to the area as regional visitors to present Fountain Hills as an option for day trips and kind of to get away from maybe what they originally came here for, to come and relax and enjoy our restaurants. And we've also spent a lot of time driving home that this is a safe place to do outdoor activities. So our hiking, our biking, our golf, as people were trying to social distance and find fun things to do that were safe, we've tried to take advantage of that. We've highlighted our unique dining, and we are in the process, now that we are hopefully coming out of COVID, of doing this health and wellness branding that we've talked about for a significant amount of time. One of the ads that we've run, and I'll talk a little bit more about that relationship, but this is an example of an ad we've run in Canadian Snowbird magazine. So again, we know those people, not this year because of COVID, but last year, Canadian Snowbirds are coming to the area. We've tried to encourage them to enjoy Fountain Hills. So last year started in a good place. The mayor hosted the Canadian breakfast. Glenn Williamson joined us. He is the honorary consul to Canada. And so we, again, wanted to thank our snowbird visitors. And so we started with that. And not long after that, it's not in the presentation, but we hosted Arizona Families Friday field trip. So we got some real positive coverage for Fountain Hills early in the year. Obviously, things slowed down after that in terms of us being out there with the community and being able to host events, but we didn't stop in terms of our advertising. In fact, in many cases, we actually picked up and did more than we typically do. So because of the availability of advertising at Sky Harbor and Phoenix Mesa Gateway, we were able to do, again, more than we typically do. So at Sky Harbor, that includes, and is still there, a large lighted sign in the American Airlines area, and I'll show you an example of that in just a minute. And at Mesa Gateway, we had been running a video in the baggage claim area, but we added a fabric sign also in the gate areas. So here's some examples of that. On the left, you see examples of the Sky Harbor signage that we've run. And then here is Phoenix Mesa Gateway. The monitors, you'll see we have a video of our Music Fest. We have about a 30-second video that runs in baggage claim, making people aware of Fountain Hills. And then you can see to the far right is the signage that I discussed. And here's another view of that signage at Gateway. So magazine, we were, again, driving home the message that we're a safe place to get out and be active and stay safe. So we ran 3 ads in Canadian Snowbird magazine, 2 in Experience AZ, 3 in Phoenix magazine. We had 2 e-blasts that go out to all Phoenix magazine subscribers. And a big portion of that was related, again, to a safe place to be active, but also to promote the Music Fest. And so we'll show you that. Actually, before we get to that. So spring training, we have made it a focus the last couple of years to advertise in the stadiums that surround Fountain Hills. So we utilize our Salt River Pima grant money to give back and promote the town with the Diamondbacks. We've also advertised at Sloan Park, so whenever the Cubs make a pitching change, it's brought to you by Fountain Hills, and you'll see the Fountain Hills ad at the A's Stadium, which runs for a full inning. So we've, again, tried to target those people that are already coming here and encouraging them to make Fountain Hills a part of their trip. And then back to the top, we also ran some ads with the independent newspapers. They had some special spring training editions, so we advertised in the Scottsdale edition as well as the Apache Junction, Gold Canyon, Mesa edition. We helped promote Music Fest. Again, we utilize our Salt River Pima grant money to help community services with producing Music Fest, and we also used some of that money to promote that. So you have a couple of examples here of some of the things that we did with that funding in partnership with community services. Again, back to that theme of when people are here, we want to encourage them to experience Fountain Hills. We have been a sponsor of the Waste Management Phoenix Open. Last year, we sponsored a hole. This year, because of reduced attendance, we did not participate in that, but we did participate with Barrett Jackson, both in 2020 and 2021. And this is an example of the ad that ran in their program this year. We also are part of their pre-event e-blast. So as people are preparing or deciding what their trip is going to look like, we encourage them to come to Fountain Hills, but also to think about utilizing our hotels. So that's been a part of our campaign over the last couple years. We are constantly trying to brand the town and get a positive image of Fountain Hills out along with community services. This year we added these mugs, which have been extremely popular, and also still continue to sell the State 48 shirts. So we're pretty pleased with those branding efforts. We updated our town visitors guide during this last year. That's 25,000 copies are produced, and we ensure that those get out to visitor centers all over the state. They're also provided to hotels and resorts, as well as our two major airports. We ensure that there's a constant supply at the airports. We update our dining guide at least annually, again, just to highlight our unique restaurants, and those are available on our website, but also within our town facilities. We started doing a tourism newsletter in late 2019. Over the last year and just short of a half, we've done 5 editions of that. That goes out to 4,500 subscribers, and it highlights our tourism news, any updates, and any information about our own events, but also regional events that would encourage people to come to the region. So again, we've produced 5 copies of that, or editions of that, over the last year and 4 months. The webcam, I came to you about 2 months ago and talked to you a little bit about that. The response to that has been incredible. In the first 6 weeks that it was operating, the EarthCam website had 750,000 views of our webcam. So it's hard to quantify that there's anything else that's ever gotten that many views of Fountain Hills. It's been incredible, the response, and we're very pleased with that partnership. And then along those lines, you can see the response to Experience Fountain Hills ever since the webcam has been up has been tremendous as well. We've seen dramatically increased web traffic since that's happened, spiking with the greening of the fountain, where hundreds of people, or thousands of people actually, viewed that greening of the fountain. Just wanted to highlight this. This isn't directly related to tourism, but we've been running these ads in various locations across the country, encouraging small business owners with families to think about if they're relocating, to think about relocating to Fountain Hills. And this, the response takes people to the Experience Fountain Hills website so they can get a little taste of what our town is like. So we've gotten quite a good response. Over 1,500 people click through in about a month of running these ads.
So James, on the ads, if you could just go back, that was also local talent. We used a local company to help us with that,
that's
to
correct.
promote this.
Correct. And we are going to begin running some ads that are more tourism and health and wellness focused, very similar on Facebook in the coming weeks. So with that, I will take any questions that you might have.
Well, I want to compliment you and your staff of 12.
Amanda deserves a tremendous amount of.
Well, and seriously, I want to know how you do all this. Who does all this? It's an enormous amount of work.
Thank you.
Just the two of you?
Yeah.
Holy smokes. Question that I've raised in the past, even preceding you joining the staff, is, how do you measure success? And I know that's very difficult, but one thing occurred to me. Is it possible to work with the chamber and have the chamber keep some kind of records of people who call in to find out where they're calling from, or what caused them to call in and ask questions? If we get some feel for how to measure success, it would really be helpful.
Okay. We can certainly look into that. Yeah.
That's a non-committal.
I don't know, anything we do tourism-wise generally drives people to either our tourism phone line or the Experience Fountain Hills website. So I will have to check with Betsy and see if they are fielding these calls, and certainly ask her if she would track it. But everything we do tries to steer people back to our own assets. So.
Well, and for people who call in here, is there any way to just ask them one or two simple questions? Where are you calling from? Where are you from? What caused you to call?
Yeah.
Just to try to get some sense as to how successful this is. The other thing is, how do you know we had 100 Canadian visitors?
They were at the breakfast. We estimate that there's over 300 households that are owned by Canadian nationals in Fountain Hills, and we had approximately 100 that attended the breakfast.
Okay, thank you.
No, I understand what you're trying to say, Alan, with the trying to get a feel for the results, but I mean, hardly anyone calls anymore, right? I mean, they're clicking on something from their phone or their computer or iPad or something. So, like you said, they're going to a website, what have you. So, I mean, it's good to check with the chamber and see what you can do, but I just don't know how successful that'll be as far as phone calls anymore. But.
And James, if this is a report you like, maybe we'll start doing this on either an annual or semi-annual basis and come back and report. What I think there is some information we could probably get from social media on like the ads that we place and things like that. We can get some metrics that we can share with you, because there is some of that information we can. We just wanted to give you a basic overview of what the activities have been. Even despite the pandemic, I can tell you that what you saw the past year, the last 12 months, I think they've done a tremendous job. And so I think looking forward to getting out of the pandemic, I think we're going to see not only the economy kind of come back, but I also think we're going to do very well and be positioned very strongly with their efforts that they've done the past year.
Sometimes you know, when you go stay at a hotel or whatever, and I know this is for day visitors also, but sometimes they'll say, how did you find out about us? And, you know, I don't know if you can do that with restaurants or any of the things that we're actually pushing here, but that's, I know that I've been to places where they said, you know, how did you find out about us? But I imagine in your business, there's, like you were saying, metrics or something that where you do this and your expectation is, you know, you do X and you expect Y. So, you know, maybe something like that would be helpful for us to know. So yeah, we're talking about the shirts and the merch. It's really been, when we were doing this Follies thing, and we had Peggy and her husband and Mike and the magazines, and we all were very easy to, we wanted to wear shirts that had to do with Fountain Hills, and we all had several to choose from. So I know that all along the years we've been able to build that identity up. It was pretty neat. And then the family thing is so funny because, you know, years and years ago, 79, whatever, MCO, sorry, Larry, MCO used to put these ads in the Times. You've probably even seen some of them. And it would be like this, and it was always a young family, and I know that my sisters, we were all in there, you know, as, why did you come to Fountain Hills? And it kind of cracked me up because one of the ones you had in there was Mike Pamaditis, and he like went to school with my son, so and he came back, so it's really awesome to see that. And it's just dynamic, you know, it's like, and for business, I mean, you really were able to roll that all into that, so I really thought that was effective. Anybody else have any questions or comments?
Thank you. I would just want to add one thing, Mayor and Council, if you don't mind. One of the things that's in the strategic plan is for Rachel and Community Services and Economic Development and Tourism to collaborate on bringing more events to Fountain Hills. So Rachel and I have started those conversations. We're planning to bring our teams together as we're opening up and try to look for opportunities for more events here in town.
That's a great idea. That kind of ties into our work study session stuff too. I've had a couple of people have ideas for events that really are a combination, so thank you.
Great.
Thanks so much,
Thank
James. We appreciate it. Our next item is a call to the public. Do we have any speaker cards? No? Okay. Then our consent agenda, we only have one item, I think, so could I get a motion?
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Our regular agenda item, the first item is our, it's not an action item, it's just consideration of modifications to the draft sign ordinance. Grady or John?
I'll go ahead and turn it over to John, but as you recall, we've had these discussions with the council on some of the initiatives that John's taken related to the sign ordinance and trying to feel the council out on what they'd like to see and what is legal in light of the Reed versus the town of Gilbert. So I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Wesley, who's going to go over his presentation to you. And then the goal of tonight is really to hopefully get very close to getting this wrapped up, because we intend to bring this back to you, you know, with everything in a final format for your action. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Wesley.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. Vice Mayor, I know you're excited. Favorite topic back again. Yes, sir. Let's do it. So we met a couple of months ago again, getting some input from the council and direction on what you'd like to see and possible tweaks, changes to the draft ordinance. I have 4 items that are on my list that we need to continue to get some direction on. 3 are directly related to your previous discussion, and one more just came up as I was going back through the ordinance and had some questions, things that came up with regard to electronic message signs. So we're going to talk about those also. As Mr. Miller said, hopefully we'll get the direction we need on these last changes and can go from there to then make those adjustments to the full ordinance itself and schedule the public hearing where we can then hopefully take action on the plan. So temporary signs in the right-of-way is probably the biggest discussion item you had at your last meeting. Do we want to allow those or not? Are they necessary? One of the questions was, what do other cities and towns do? So I took a look through several of the ordinances I've been reviewing over the last couple of years to look specifically at that. And so you can see on the list, Tempe, Paradise Valley do not allow temporary signs in their right-of-way. Mesa does not allow them in the right-of-way either, but has an exception for their pedestrian area downtown and allows them on the sidewalks in those areas. A-frames are allowed on sidewalks in Gilbert, so that's would be in the right-of-way. And Sedona found this really interesting. They're allowed in right-of-way in residential areas, but not in commercial areas. And then Queen Creek allows them 15 feet behind the curb, which may or may not be within a right-of-way, depending on how wide the paving is. So the current draft ordinance allows A-frames in right-of-ways, but not on sidewalks. Does not allow banners in the right-of-way. Post and board signs, which again, think of typical for sale sign, is allowed on private property 6 foot behind a curb. So there's a little bit of a question there. I have the way I have that written, so I think I at least need some clarification if we're going to allow it in the right-of-way or not on that. I'll need to clarify that language. Yard signs similar on private property, 6 foot behind curb. Then the specific category of residential directional signs, which is typically going to be A-frames or yard signs, are allowed 1 foot behind curb. So when they're used as that residential directional sign, again, think typically open house signs, garage sale signs, those can be in the right-of-way, 1 foot behind curb. And just a reminder, this does not include political signs. Those are governed by state statutes and would typically be allowed in the right-of-way. So, reasons we might want to allow placement of temporary signs in the right-of-way. We've got hilly property. And sometimes on some of the steep sloped property, you want to put a for sale sign or your own kind of yard sign out. The slope is so steep, if you get behind the right-of-way, you're going to be so far down the hill, nobody can see it. And so that might be a reason to allow them. Property owners maintain out to the curb. So why can't they put a temporary sign out between the right-of-way and the curb? It's land they maintain. They may not understand why they couldn't. Challenge to enforcement, just because of the number of these signs, also knowing where the right-of-way is on a given piece of property. If there's a lack of consensus on where that right-of-way line is, to go get the dimensions and come back out and measure it and that kind of thing to really establish where that right-of-way is could be a challenge. Historic practice, we've been allowing them in the right-of-way for a number of years, and so it's going to be a lot of work with the citizens to help them understand if we make the change to not allow them. And then as we focus specifically on the downtown area, again, the idea of do we want to allow the A-frames on the sidewalks in the pedestrian area downtown, obviously that would be allowance in the right-of-way. Reasons to prohibit the signs in the right-of-way, safety issues is probably one of the primary reasons. It's a person getting out of their car, parking someplace along a street to get out and put a sign walking along the street, being adjacent to the roadway, that's not necessarily safe. Safety issues of the signs, if they get blown over, knocked down into the street, onto the sidewalk, somebody trying to get around them. Again, that's a bit of a safety concern. It can create issues of trespassing, somebody going on to somebody else's private property as they're putting the signs in, even if they're out in the right-of-way that at least appears to be on their property. They might go across their property to get to those locations. I've heard some reports of people being confused when they see an open house sign about where the open house really is and going onto property that really isn't where the open house is, and people having to deal with that. We've seen pictures, illustrations of, we get a lot of these signs that are unsightly. The clutter aspect, the visual impact on the community is not necessarily very pleasing. We've also had discussions about with the various apps and things available electronically these days, where you can find out where open houses are, where garage sales are. They're not really as necessary maybe as they used to be, and so not needed. And then again, as we just saw from looking at other cities and towns, there are several communities that don't allow them currently, so we won't be cutting any new territory here. It's been accepted in other places. So those are some of the pros and cons to think about then as we come and look at each type and what we're looking for direction on with regard to these signs. So A-frame signs, do we want to allow them in the right-of-way? I'm actually going to look for your direction here on each of these as we go along. So that's a general question about right-of-ways. Then more specifically, do we want to allow them on the sidewalks in the downtown area? And I'm stopping here till I get direction. Hopefully.
I actually have an opinion on the sidewalk. I think that the sidewalk is a safety issue, and I do not think we should be placing A-frame signs on the sidewalk.
I agree. I think that they create havoc. I think they get in the way of people and especially people with wheelchairs and maybe other disabilities, it's hard to navigate sometimes. I just think that it would also be something that would be very difficult for the town to monitor if they were allowed. So I'm for not allowing them on the sidewalks.
Would you put up the slide that indicates the problems with not allowing them in the right of way?
So the problems with not allowing them, so why they would be prohibited?
Prohibit.
Or do you want the other way?
I think the one
Or
before.
do you want that one? Why we should allow them?
Yeah, that one.
Okay.
How have Mesa and Paradise Valley dealt with these particular issues? Do we know?
So, Mayor, Councilmember, Mesa, with regard to their prohibition on the temporary signs in the right-of-way, as a resident of Mesa, I can tell you I see lots of temporary signs in the right-of-way, even in medians in the community. It's not been historically a high priority for the code enforcement staff there to enforce this provision of the ordinance.
How long has that been in existence?
That's been there for 3 or 4 years.
And have you seen a diminution in the number of signs?
No. Paradise Valley, I didn't have that, I don't think I had that in my list. Yeah, I don't have any information on how effective it's been there.
Okay, thank you.
Well, this goes to something we've already talked about, which is inability to enforce shouldn't be a reason to not have a good law on the books. We've been through this for many, many years. Interesting that you had the historic practice, but if you really think about a historic practice, from my point of view, from years ago, we didn't have signs anywhere in town, and we didn't even have political signs before they changed the law. So, so my historic practice in Fountain Hills was that you would never drive down El Lago and see, any kind of signs all over the place. So I always have a problem with the idea of not doing something because you don't think you can enforce it if it's a good thing to do. And I'm not saying that that's what you're saying, but we've been through this before. We were with this with illegal electronic lights that were just let go until finally we changed the law. Then all of a sudden it was legal. We talked about the speeding earlier. Does that mean you change the law because we're having a hard time enforcing it? I don't tend to think that that's the way we should go. And I'm really curious about Tempe because obviously they have all businesses, they have all homes, they have the college, they have everything. How do they manage to do this? It seems like that would be the law I would like to the ordinance I'd like to take a look at is Tempe, because, Paradise Valley, we know they don't have a lot of businesses, but they certainly have a lot of homes and yard sales and all those kind of things. How do they manage to not allow it? And then they do have hotels and resorts and things like that. I'm sure they have houses for sale and open houses in Paradise Valley, but it doesn't look like that. It doesn't look like you're gonna see a sign on a stop sign or a box in the middle of the road. So I think that other cities are showing that they are doing it, or they've got it on the books. And that was kind of what I was hoping to drill down on is, what does Tempe do? Theirs is the simplest one, does not allow signs in the right-of-way except as allowed by state law. Taking that further in Fountain Hills, we have the sign-free zone for political signs that is still legal. So that we still have zones in Fountain Hills where signs aren't, where political signs even aren't allowed. So I like to pursue that. I see, yes, did you want to say something, Vice Mayor? Did you have your thing up first? No? No? Okay.
When we talk about them being unsightly, I certainly haven't done a survey, but I'm guessing that 75, 80% of the unsightliness is signs in the right-of-way. I just don't believe for a minute that it can't be enforced. I think it's a question of, I think a town manager could come up with a plan. Once people's signs are taken away and they have to go pick them up, I don't think they're going to put them back up again in the right-of-way. We could hire a couple of people part-time who dedicate themselves just to that issue for a year And after a year, I suspect we wouldn't need that anymore. So I don't think it's unenforceable.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I tend to agree with what the mayor said. I mean, I've been out here for decades as well, and a lot of historic things going on there. And yeah, and I found it kind of ironic that enforcement is brought up as an issue, you know, difficult to enforce if we ban them, but you know, it's been difficult to enforce our current regulations as well. So I just don't see the difference there. It's going to be difficult no matter what we do. I mean, I was, you know, I think it was Saturday driving around town in the garage sales. I mean, there was poster boards all over, stop sign posts, and right there in the median and the Safeway intersection, big box and sign taped to you know, a warning sign there. I mean, it's just was ridiculous, you know, and it was way up on Teepee, kind of in my neighborhood, so there was just signs all the way up there. And you know, as I half jokingly pointed out a couple of weeks ago, that we held a garage sale at our house, and you know, I didn't post one sign, and you know, ad in the Times newspaper, Facebook, and Craigslist, and you know, all kinds of people showed up. And I know at one of our meetings where we discussed this, it was brought up about, you know, businesses, and a lot of people either don't have smartphones or don't know how to use them, or et cetera, et cetera. But I mean, even if there's someone with a landline yet, you know, they have the Fountain Hills phone directory. I mean, you can call the business from your landline and say, well, where are you again? And get directions. I mean, there's just ways to overcome all these things, I think. And I just think we need to take a next step here and just, to me, beautify our community more. And I know, you know, businesses are going to say it's anti-business, but it's not. There's just so many new and variety of ways of advertising and marketing today that didn't exist before, that I just think we're beyond this.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I am opposed to having the signs actually on the sidewalk, but not opposed to signs in the right-of-way. I will respectfully disagree with Councilman Charno. I've spoke to the business owners personally, and many of the business owners say that they have business driven to them by having the A-phrase signs out in front of the shop or their stores and businesses on the right-of-way. I am vehemently opposed to doing anything negative against businesses in town, especially after recovering from this COVID. So opposed to them being in the on the sidewalk for all the reasons that Councilmember McMahon stated, you know, right away, and wheelchairs, scooters, things like that. But on the right of way, I believe that we owe it to our businesses that if they want to put a sign out, that we let them put a sign out. Garage sales, there's so many, I don't know how you can control it.
No, I just want to add, I mean, we've been regulating these signs for decades, and if the argument is, you know, it helps businesses and why why ban them? I mean, we're already agreeing to some restrictions. You know, you could carry the argument like, well, why have any restrictions at all? If we really want to help businesses, why don't we just let them do whatever they want? So, you know, I think we've been trying to juggle this halfway between kind of a thing, and I just don't think it's been successful.
And the other thing that, if one of the things we talked about was the A-frames and not having a time limit on them, but it's got to be on your own property. And I don't think a lot of shops have an issue if they can have it on their own property. If there are ones that, you know, it's just impossible for an A-frame to be on their property, I think we talked about being open to some kind of permitting, which wouldn't have to cost anything, it doesn't have to be a big deal, but it's more of an exception if you have a store or something that is driven by walk-ins, let's say, or, you know, or drive-bys, and if they truly cannot have a sign on their own property that does what we would hope, then, or they would hope, then I think and again, this gets back to, what does Tempe do? What does all these that have said they're not in the right of way? They're not banning all temporary signs, they're banning them in the right of way. So it seems like there might be a solution here that we just don't know well enough by looking at what these other cities and towns do. I would never believe that Tempe is having any issues with their businesses, being found or being successful. So I still would like to have more detail on what one or two of those cities do, Paradise Valley particularly, and Tempe particularly. I also want to make sure I ask Jerry if he has anything to say, and if we have any speaker cards before I forget. No speaker. No?
I do have something to say, Mayor.
Okay, thank you,
Can
Councilman.
you hear me? Yes. I think it's important to remember that every sale that these businesses make with these A-frame signs, the town benefits from. So I don't think it's a good idea. I'm all in favor of keeping them off the sidewalks. I agree with Councilwoman McMahon and Councilman Spellich. I think that's a hazard, and that's something that we can control. But I think you're taking away again, I'm speaking from my own personal experience with the shop that I work in town. I can't tell you how many times people have come in and said, oh, I saw your sign and I came in. And these are sales that these struggling businesses need today, and the town also benefits from those sales. We pick up sales tax from every one of those sales. So again, I'm against banning the signs in the right-of-way, especially if a business sits off the main road and that's their attraction for people to find them. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilwoman?
Tempe doesn't allow the signs in the right of way, but if you kind of take a mental check and walk around the town, they're mostly sidewalks and they have more people walking, and I feel like it would be more of a hazard, and that's probably why they don't allow it. I'm kind of looking at the Mesa where they don't allow the temporary signs in the right of way except in the defined downtown pedestrian overlay area. I feel like we could do something similar, but I think we need to allow them. We do have a lot of businesses that rely on it. I am not going to be able to vote against letting our businesses have A-frame signs.
Councilman?
John, have we done any kind of a survey to determine how many businesses can place their signs on their property? For example, Jerry, you can correct me on this, but Chocofin has a lot of land around the building. I'm guessing that the Chocofin sign is on that land rather than in the right-of-way. That could be legal. But for example, and I mentioned this before, today I went by two shops that my wife and I frequent because I wanted to see what their situation was. Both of them had signs. Both of them had them on their own land, and they were very visible. I just find myself wondering if we look around town, how many shops cannot accommodate a sign on their property. I don't know that you can answer that right now, but I think it's worth riding around town taking a look.
So Mayor, council member, no, we wouldn't have any specific information, statistics on that. At this point, we would have to go out and survey it, but just thinking kind of about the situation, of course, in the town center area, because buildings are built to the property line. For most businesses, there isn't anything in there that they can use. Some are set back a little bit and may have that. Same is true for some of the older commercial areas. You think some of the things along Saguaro, they were built back under old standards, and so pretty much the whole front is paved. The parking lot's right up to the property line, and so there's really not any room between the parking and the right-of-way then to put a sign. Newer developments do have that though, because parking is required to be set back 10 feet from the property line, and so those are more likely to have some room out near the street that wouldn't be in parking spaces where they could put them.
I think from Mike's point of view and from some of the things that I'm hearing, we're more concerned with the right-of-way in residential areas or along El Lago and along, Palisades and things. This one resident who wrote us, she said some interesting things, and some of them had to do with HOAs and MPOA and other rules that we have about keeping our property. You need to get, and she's not complaining, but need to get permission to change your mailbox, or to, what you're trying to do is to beautify neighborhoods, and yet she lives in a spot that is often used for signs for yard sales, and so she has a sign in her front yard every weekend from somebody telling people to go wherever this is, and she's like literally found people wandering around in her backyard thinking that that was the house where it was. She also mentioned advertising in the Times and other ways in her job herself, and how to get the word out about businesses and such. So I don't actually think what David and what you guys are saying is that much different from what we're saying. We're open to looking at downtown or permit areas, but I again think that having them in the right of ways all over the town, and since we can't do anything when it comes to content, that means you're saying okay to anything, anytime in the right of way. And I just don't think I don't think that is historically what Fountain Hills has been. And I think this list of cities shows that quite a few of them feel that way too. So I feel like there's something that addresses what you're talking about, but also addresses what Mike and others are talking about
Mayor,
too.
if I may, again, in the ordinance as it's drafted, A-frame signs are allowed in residential areas only for non-residential uses, a church, a school, that type of thing, or when used as a residential directional sign. Otherwise, they're not allowed in the residential areas. They're only allowed in the commercial areas. And so picking up along that line of discussion, we could, again, craft the code so they continue to be allowed in the commercial. If you're zone commercial, you can have an A-frame sign. If you're not zone commercial, you can't use the A-frame sign.
It's not just A-frames though, we're
Well,
talking
yeah,
about.
we'll get to those other ones too.
Okay.
But focused on that one at this point. If we wanted to, we could keep it focused. Again, maybe the real concern here, the real issue, is the last bullet point on here, the residential directional signs. And maybe we just want to get rid of that category of signs, and otherwise we could keep things as they are, because again, the A-frames in the commercial areas could be on the right-of-way, but not on the sidewalk. Would have to clarify what we mean on the post and board and the yard signs and their relationship to the right-of-way and the curb.
Well, looking at that, I see allow A-frames in the rights-of-way, maybe in downtown area, and the rest of it, no. That's the way it looks like to me. Why would we need yard signs in the right-of-way in residential areas? I mean, is that the way you were all thinking? And I don't know why we have to have them in the right-of-way when it comes to businesses in any areas except for businesses, whether they're A-frames or post and board or banners or what have you. That's just the way I see that particular slide.
You listed about 6 different towns and cities, and 4 of the 6 don't allow signs in the right-of-way. I mean, there might be some that have an exception downtown or whatever, but it looks like the majority of them don't allow it. So I think, and I'd like, Mayor Dickey, I'd like to see a little bit more of what Tempe says in order to exclude them and see how they regulate it. But given the fact that the majority of towns don't allow them, I don't, and the mess that they have created in our town, I just don't think they should be allowed.
If what John said, unless I misunderstood him, what John said earlier is that you live in Tempe?
No, Mesa.
Oh, Mesa, okay, never mind. Never mind.
So, Mayor.
Because they were not voting in that,
Right.
so I want to make sure nobody feels like, right now you have to make a decision.
Right. So you don't, but I need to figure out what change I'm going to make to bring back to you. And right now, I feel like I'm hearing a majority that's saying, let's eliminate them in the right-of-way. And so unless I hear something different right now, that's the way I'm going to bring the code back to you, but you'll still have a chance to discuss it then once you see the actual language and ask for further modification.
No, I think that's what I'm hearing, but, yeah, and so post and board signs, it seems like, just about every retail center that has more than one storefront has some kind of sign out front, like, spaces for lease, and so that's a post and board sign, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so, and again, I think those would be adequately served by being, back behind the PL, then, I don't think they need to be in the right of way either. I mean, those seem to be pretty prolific right now around town, and I think it's, if it's Safeway or Bash's', but it's like one of the bigger centers. I mean, they have like 2 or 3 signs up, and they're all different companies, and I don't quite understand that either, but it just seems like, again, there's this proliferation that is out of control.
When it comes back to us, possibly for a vote, I'd like to ask Grady to be prepared to put a plan in front of us for enforcement, how he would handle it.
I've already shared this with the ones that asked me in advance of this meeting, and basically, I would not be looking at having code enforcement staff. I would be basically having a contract with a company that would just have, employees with pickup trucks and just throwing these in the back of their pickup trucks. We haven't costed that out, but I think that would be a very low-cost alternative versus hiring someone with, salary and benefits.
Thank you.
Okay, we're ready to move on then? 3 more to go. So that leads then to the related issue then, do we care about the time? And what I've heard the commission or the council saying is if we don't have them in the right of way, then maybe we're not going to worry about the time. And if they can leave them up for as long as they want to, they're on their private property. And if that's the case, then that definitely simplifies that. Right now, we do have time limit on A-frames from 7 to 9, open house, sunrise to sunset, and garage sale with no limits. So there's no time limit in the current ordinance. In the draft ordinance, there is a dusk to dawn limit, so you can put them out in the morning, you got to take them down, you can't leave them up overnight in the draft ordinance, but it's, again, for not allowing them in the right-of-way. By not allowing the temporary signs in the right-of-way, in order for anyone to do the residential directional signs, they'll have to go knock on somebody's door, and is it okay for me to put my sign to my garage sale in your yard if we leave that in? And so it'll be on private property, and will people do that or won't they? Unless we decide just to eliminate the category totally, not allow them at all.
Well, I mean, we can't really ban them from being on private property, can we?
No, because people are allowed, when we get to the table, it's not in here right now, they're allowed a certain amount of temporary signage on their lot, and if they want to use their allowance by letting somebody else put a yard sign on their property, then they could do that.
So you're saying if we eliminate the category, that wouldn't really take care of the issue you just brought up, though? I mean, then someone could still knock on a door and put one on someone's property, right? They just couldn't put it in the right of way?
Well, Mayor, council member, if we eliminate the category, though, that's allowing for you to advertise something that's not on the property. Otherwise, signs have to be on the property for which they are advertising. The exception to that is residential directional signs. So if we took away the category, then you couldn't do it at all, even on somebody's private property.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that we talked about that if it's private property, we're not going to particularly care about the time of it. And if you want to put a sign on somebody's house that isn't yours, you have to get permission.
What kind of garage sign would be allowed?
So the only 2 sign types that would be able to be used are the A-frame or the yard sign, as far as a form or type of sign. It can't be something stuck on a box or a can or whatever.
Okay.
It's those 2 types. So get rid of the time limits then because it's on private property and we don't care? Is that what I'm hearing as a consensus to bring back in the draft? Okay. Go back.
Thanks. Madam Mayor, so point of clarification, John, you're not coming back, we're not saying, not this time limit thing, but the signs on the right-of-way, we're not going to outlaw signs on the right-of-way for businesses, correct?
Correct,
Okay,
just for the residential.
for residential?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Yeah, so again, it's the,
Well, no.
so primarily it's the, well, that's what I,
Sorry, we're going to see what Tempe and they do, and I think they just don't have them on the right-of-ways at all.
Okay.
So, but I think, David, what I'm trying to
guess that-
convey is that we are willing to look at it in the commercial zone. If, we want to see what these other places do, that they're saying they're not allowed in the right-of-way, whether it's a permitting thing, whether it's, how many businesses actually can't put a sign on their own property and still get the desired result?
I mean, I understand what you're saying. I mean, no offense. I really don't give a rip what Tempe wants or what Paradise Valley want or anybody wants. We're our own community. We set the standards for what we believe the residents want. And I'm really not one for just going along with other towns because they think it's right. So I will stick by what I said, and I don't want to put words in Councilmember Grabowski's mouth, and I don't want to also speak for Councilmember Friedel, but I think we're vehemently opposed to banning these signs for businesses. I'll give you that they shouldn't be in residential areas and things like that, but there is numerous, to Councilmember Magazine's point, there's numerous places that I can name right now that use A-frame signs for their businesses that are unable to locate those signs on their property. They don't have any property to put them on. So if you, Mayor, are saying that we will ban these signs from residential areas and then businesses will come to us for a free permit after a review, I don't really have a problem with that. But I will be vehemently opposed to regulating those signs for a business. So.
Well, I mean, I would bet, every business that has an A-frame sign out there also has a sign on their storefront, and I get they might be set back or they might be around the corner or you got to go 2 blocks, hang a left, whatever, but, they choose to buy or rent at that location and they kind of know what they're getting into, and I just think there's just a proliferation of this that's just to me detracts from the business community. So that's where I'm coming from.
And just for the record, we're not looking for other towns to tell us what to do, but since this is a pretty complex and new, especially since the Gilbert Supreme Court decision, we're looking for where do we see it might be working. So again, if you look at one of them that allows them in commercial areas, I don't know, whatever. But I mean, if we can get a guidance from something, and I've actually had offers from mayors to connect with their staff to see how they do it, then why not look at that? I'm not, again, this is what Fountain Hills historically has always been to me, and it's a lot more full of signs now than it used to be, and especially since the Gilbert decision. And I think if you remember back to the political times and everything else, and even not just a regular election, but we're seeing a lot of other signs going up about, they might put a light at a stop sign or at the right turn. There's been a lot more signs than there ever was historically here. And I think that's what we're looking at. We're looking at places that have different provisions that may or may not, appeal to us. So I think that's why we're looking for it.
flags? So I've had some discussion about flags, particularly as they relate to poles versus allowing them to be displayed, hung on the side of a building. And so one option I wanted to bring back with regard to that is that we could create a standard that does allow them on a federal or state holiday to be displayed hanging from a balcony, hanging on the side of a building. So I want to see if there's support for making that adjustment. And then also, because there's been some comments about the size right now, we just have a blanket 60 square feet regardless. There seemed to be maybe some interest in lowering that for the residential areas. And so I put that in here as a question also.
Well, I'm very opposed to just letting them hang from buildings. However, I'm very in favor of letting them hang from a building on federal state holidays. To me, that makes a lot of sense.
I mentioned, excuse me, last time we had this conversation that there are rules that are in place for American flags. And it says when the U.S. flag is displayed from a building, the union of the flag should be placed at the peak unless the flag is at half staff. Wait, that's the wrong one. When the flag is displayed other than from a staff, it should be displayed flat or suspended so that its folds fall free. When displayed over street, that's unrelated. So it doesn't say we cannot hang it from buildings. I agree wholeheartedly. I don't think it's attractive, but it's already in the U.S. I mean, this is from a government-run website. So, yeah.
Well, except that Gilbert Supreme Court said we can't differentiate rules based on content. So if we do that, then we have to do any flag with any message on it. That's the whole dilemma. And when we talk about flags here, we're talking about not banners right now, anyway,
Correct.
right? Yeah, so.
Hopefully we have a significant, sufficient distinction between a banner and a flag.
How are we defining buildings?
Defining buildings. I don't know, I could pull out the zoning code, it has a definition in there, but.
Well, the reason I ask is that, and I'll say the same thing I said last time, which is, I, for one, don't want to open my blinds and have a flag staring at me from the house next door. And I don't think you can differentiate certain kinds of buildings.
Right, just, time, place, and manner, so we can regulate, as we suggested here, federal or state holidays. And so that's very limited in the number of times of year it could happen. But again, it wouldn't necessarily be an American flag or a state flag. It could be a message of any kind that would be on that flag if we allowed this.
I have a question. One of the things I think about flags, and I'm not just talking about the American flag, I'm talking about any flag. And last time we had a discussion was, when does a flag become a banner? When does a banner become a flag? I think one of the delineating things is the fact that a flag is usually on a flagpole, which to me helps separate it from being a banner. So I think that it being required to be on a flagpole, like it has been in the past, right? That is consistent with what equals and constitutes a flag.
Mayor, council member, I'm not sure it's entirely clear in the current code with that distinction, but certainly that is typical. And that's the way the current code, the new code is drafted. It does just reference flagpoles.
Well, because most of the definitions, or I don't know most, but a couple of the definitions that I've looked up, it always talks about a flagpole and then the requirements of a flagpole consistent with it being a flag. So it's almost like it's a unit. But I know people can take them up and hang them from buildings or whatever, but in this case, I think that it might be smart just to keep it, and have them on a flagpole.
I don't think we can differentiate that. There is a U.S. rule in place for American flags, and we can't then say, if it's not on a flagpole, it doesn't qualify as a U.S. flag.
I'm not talking about content. So I'm not just talking about the American flag. I'm talking about any flag.
I think at the last meeting, we talked about this because I know David mentioned having flag poles, and there was some confusion as to thinking that had to be the big flag poles that come from the ground, but it also includes the flags that you just put in your house on that you can, if you want to fly it all the time. So, and I thought that we did come up with the idea that would be on a flagpole, but it didn't have to be that kind of a major flagpole. It could be the one that's, you put by a garage or whatever. So, and again, recognizing that it could be any message on it. So trying to avoid that sort of draping, because remember we were talking about a house that had some just fabric draped on it, and so we're trying to avoid that. And since we can't say it can only be an American flag, that's again back to the dilemma, treating everything equally. Grady, did you have something?
Just, I think when this came up, the vice mayor brought up the fact that in his experience, that it was with perhaps a townhouse or a condo that didn't have land to put a pole on. And so he was suggesting maybe it might be something through zoning, that maybe a multifamily housing or a condo or something, that in those cases, it might be permitted to be draped on the building when they don't have the available property to put a pole in. So I know that was part of the discussion, if I remember correctly.
Right, but that had to do with that kind of pole. Why couldn't, I live in a condo, I can put a flag on a pole.
Well, some don't have, what I'm saying is either their association maybe has some CC&Rs that prohibit it, or they don't have, maybe, it's a zero lot line, so they don't have anything to put a pole on the
Well,
property.
it's on your building. Well, anyway, I thought we did, I thought we decided this at the last meeting, to tell you the truth, so.
I don't
Mike?
remember. So with the possible option of just allowing flags to hang on federal or state holidays, so, if it's done tastefully, I don't have a problem of my neighbor across the street, hanging a flag, American flag 365 days a year, but if we allow that, then he could hang any kind of a flag. So that's the problem. So I think Councilwoman McMahon had said, she probably would favor the holiday and things like that. So I'm kind of leaning that way too. At least I would give some leeway as far as hanging flags, at some point in time, but not letting it get out of hand like 24/7, 365 with some, flag type material that's not American or state flag, something like that. So it's almost a no-win situation.
I don't know. I think, well, it sounds like a flag on a pole is okay anytime, but we did limit it to 2, I think. And then a flag hanging, not from a pole, on federal or state holidays. Is that what you're saying? Okay.
I'll bring it back with that, then you will have a chance to see how that's worded. Any desire to reduce the size in a residential area from 60 to 24 square feet? Just leave it all 60. Keep it all 60, fine with that.
I think it's reasonable for a residential area to have a 24 square foot flag. What did you say, 60 square feet?
Right now, the code is 60 square feet everywhere. Based on a regulation of the current code. The current code has some distinctions in smaller flags in residential areas that have to be smaller flags, but they're thinking they're not American flags, they're corporate flags or whatever. Now, I can't make that distinction between what the flag type is, so I just made it 60 everywhere in the draft code. But based on some discussion last time, I just wanted to throw that out to see if there was a desire in the residential areas to set a smaller maximum. 24 square feet from my research seemed like would be the kind of the size that might work. But if you want to keep it 60 every place, that's fine.
Me too.
Okay.
I have another question, and I'm going to direct it to Aaron. I have a question. If we do the exception for federal and state holidays, is that regulating the American flag? Is that on content? Can that be construed as content-based?
Mayor, Council, I don't think that it would. I think that would constitute a time restriction out of the time, place, and manner restrictions. I understand that potentially there would be more of a certain kind of flag that might tend to be flown on that day, but I don't think that it's a direct regulation of the content.
Okay, moving on to a new discussion item. And this has to do with electronic message centers. Looking back at how I drafted a piece dealing with the time that they have to be turned off at night, and comparing it to the current ordinance, realized there was maybe a little bit of confusion in the draft ordinance. And so currently in our ordinance, there's a provision that says if business is closed, the sign needs to be turned off. There's another provision, though, that talks about at nighttime having only time and temperature. And so there's some confusion in the current ordinance which it's supposed to be. And so historically, our code enforcement has allowed the signs to stay on at night, but they can't change the message. Just have it display time and temperature and nothing else. Well, now we can't regulate the content. So by current code, then we're allowing you to just display a static message all night long, whatever that message is. So my question for the council is, do we want to continue to allow a static message at night when the business is closed? Do we want the signs turned off at night when the business is closed? If a business is open but at night, do we want to keep
What about a closed sign?
at night?
I think we should leave that on.
At night, if the business is open, do we want them to keep a static message?
I don't know, Councilman.
We don't have, I don't think, that many businesses that have lighted signs, do we?
There's not very many, there's half dozen or so.
I'm sorry?
There's half dozen or so of the electronic message sign, but that's another related issue. We don't regulate regular signs and whether they stay on lit at night or not. So, you know, Joe's store can keep his light on all night long if he wants to, because there's nothing that says he has to turn it off. And so are we going to make somebody with electronic message sign turn theirs off at night because it's electronic message sign?
I'm sorry, say that again slower.
So just
The mask doesn't help.
I know, it's challenging, I start talking too fast. So any store that has a lighted sign, they're closed at night, there's nothing in our ordinances that say that sign has to be turned off. But we are saying if you have electronic message sign, if you're closed, you have to turn that one off. So what's the difference?
So that's what we're saying is Safeway's got a sign, it's always lit.
Floor?
But then the Chamber's got a sign that's the electronic message sign. And do we want to say they can only have one screen after hours or whatever?
Or have to turn it off?
Or have to turn it off?
Right.
We allowed an electronic sign. We knew when we allowed an electronic sign that there would be messages flashing. They have light ordinances that they already have to meet. And I know, like, the Chamber is on top of it. Betsy and I have talked about it a number of times. I can't speak to any of the other signs, but I don't see that we should restrict their sign usage after dark or after they're closed or whatever.
I think some of it was when there were condos close by, so after 10 or whatever it was, that they didn't want them to be changing the message. But, you know, I think static, that would kind of make sense, because if you're letting everybody else leave their lights on static and not moving. But I think there are a couple that are in areas that they might reflect onto homes or condos. So we might want to consider that then they would just have a static message, because then that's the same like any other, right? Like, it just stays still.
I would be happy to compromise with that, but I don't think it's fair to ask them to turn it off.
No, I agree with that. I think a static message, leaving it on at night, I think is fine.
Okay, very good. Transitions. So when you change from one message to another, our current ordinance doesn't really address that. I had put in the new ordinance that it has to be instantaneous change, no fade, no dissolve, no kind of sliding the messages across. Some codes allow that kind of change, others don't. Most of our signs today allow for some kind of fade in, dissolve kind of change. So I'm thinking maybe I ought to go ahead and change that to be more consistent with current practice, allowing the signs to fade, or just leaving it open. so it doesn't have to be that instantaneous change.
I'm the only one having trouble, I guess. You're suggesting what now?
So I've drafted the current ordinance so it requires instantaneous change between messages on electronic sign. Most of the signs today do some kind of fade or dissolve from one message to another. And so I'm suggesting that I change this so that it allows for the current practice that's going on. It's common in other towns to also allow for this kind of fade, dissolve kind of process as you go from one message to another.
Is it a safety issue?
There's a slight concern. There's a slight concern that you get to that idea of animation. You're trying to avoid animation in these signs because it can be distracting to a driver. And so that's why you try to be a little bit careful about that. But again, I see
Like
it.
if you're driving by and something starts to come up, you might want to see what it's going to say? Is that why it's better to do it instantaneous?
Yeah, that's it. Anyway.
I don't mind the fading and the dissolving, et cetera. It's kind of a part of having an electronic sign, and I feel like we're already getting ready to put limitations on them. I don't want to take that away from them.
Yeah, me either. It's like, I didn't know we could regulate such things, but, I mean, I think it would behoove an owner of such a sign, you wouldn't want to prolong the fading or the dissolving or the
Well, yeah,
twisting or whatever
right.
it
They wanna
does.
get
You
to the
want it
next
to happen
message.
fairly fast,
Right.
because otherwise you're not going to see the message and you're just seeing the special effects. So I guess I'm okay with leaving it, but I don't know. I can't really regulate the timing of it, but it just seems to me like these things need to happen fairly quick anyway. So
Yeah. Again, just as a comparison, the Mesa Code gives you 2 seconds to do that change. So it does have a standard in there.
so you can
You
implement.
can. Again, you can.
Is that 2 seconds standard? Is that good time,
that-
you think?
That's the only one I saw with a specific standard in it. But
I mean, I'd favor that if that's a common practice.
So one last one here, council, and I'll be done. Let you go on to more exciting things. There is in the draft ordinance a specific procedure for us to use to measure the brightness of the sign. As I've been talking to some more folks since then, there are some alternative ways that could be done. And so I'm thinking we don't really want to have one specific way in the code because that limits our ability to adjust over time or to use alternative approaches that might be just as good. So I'm proposing that I will take that out of the code and leave a more general statement in there about the process as approved by the Development Service Director, something that gives us a little bit more flexibility in how we actually do those measurements. So again, we can evolve with time or technologies or those types of things and not be locked into one way.
I have a question. Thank you. How do you measure that? I thought that with the electric signs, there was a certain, there were already restrictions on the lighting because of the dark sky and things like that. So can you explain a little bit more what you mean?
Yes.
Thank you.
Mayor, Councilmember. So yes, the signs come from the manufacturer. They're supposed to be preset and they're supposed to be set up so they automatically change with the lighting conditions and so forth. Sometimes those don't work right. Sometimes somebody goes in and fiddles with the settings. And so they're like light guns, basically, luminance meters that can be used. Stand in front of the sign and take readings to see if it really is at the brightness level that meets the code. And so there are different ways to do that. I've learned a little bit more about that over the last month or so. And so I think it'd behoove us to have a little bit more flexibility than one way that we have to do those. Okay? I'm done. See, that wasn't so hard.
No. Let's replay it.
Thank you very much, Mayor, Council. I will work on the draft and hopefully have it back to you next month.
Thank you, John. Thanks, everyone. Remember what I said at the beginning of this meeting? For the next several meetings, so just be prepared. Next, we are going to be talking about, I believe, yes, Justin, a purchasing agreement. Do you need a break?
Good evening, Madam Mayor, Vice Mayor, council members. Over the last nearly 10 years, we have been able to take advantage of good direction and planning and utilize the limited funding we have for not only mill and overlay, but actually some full reconstruction on our roads, including the ability to address a large number of our backlog. Excuse me. As a result of this, included in this year's plan, we were able to realize some savings in regards to the mill and overlay and full depth construction. We are here tonight to ask you to allow us to spend that funding for an additional, less expensive pavement management in regards to slurry sealing. We provided some maps to you over the last several meetings, including the downtown area and the local streets. As part of that, in those maps, we also ask your permission to do some crack filling in the streets that have a good PCI rating or a relatively good grade level, are post incorporation and with a good base. We've been able to do that, and with the money saved from the paving, we would like to slurry seal some of those streets. We're still working towards exactly how much funding we will have available, but we're looking at from $250,000 to $350,000 in savings that will be available, and we will utilize that in June. It should be noted, yes, sir. You have a question, sir? Oh, it should be noted, since the last time we entered into an agreement for slurry sealing, there have been some advancements in regards to the polymers and the asphalt and the emulsifiers. Historically, when we would come before council, we would indicate that this treatment is good for 5 to 7 years. It prolongs the life. It allows or it minimizes the penetration whenever we have storm events, should we get them. And it also helps with skid resistance and the overall appearance of the street. We now know through research that, in fact, this particular type of polymer coating can actually extend the life as far out as 10 or 12 years, which is excellent news to a small community like this that struggles to come up with funding for the pavement management. With that, the intent with approval tonight, we will get started in June. For those of you that may or may not remember, back 10 years ago, slurry sealing is relatively fast. It's minimally invasive because they come in and they do one half of the street. They let it dry, and the next day or two, they come back and do the other half of the street. So there's a minimal amount of disruption to not only the commerce, but also to the residential traffic that uses those streets on a regular basis. With that, I will certainly answer any questions that I'm able to.
Turns out I do have a question, but it's not directly related to this, but it reminds me that we said we were going to spend $1 million to coat Saguaro and Shea. Was that in the CIP?
Madam Mayor, council member, we indeed will be spending a considerable amount of money to do a seal coat on Shea and Saguaro, and that is part of our pavement management. That doesn't fall under CIP, sir.
And when will we be asked to approve that? Any idea?
We will be asking this winter to do it next spring. Staff and the town manager are currently working on a request for proposals to determine what the best product is for the areas that we have selected.
And are we still talking, you think we're still talking about $1 million or so?
Yes, sir. In excess of that, most likely, given the amount we need to do.
Thank you.
A question? I looked at the contract, and the contract looks like it is good to up to $1.2 million.
Madam Mayor, that is correct.
Okay.
So what we are asking for this time is we are asking permission to spend up to $400,000 in this fiscal year, but it also allows us next year, which starts as early as July, to do additional work if we have the funding available, pending budget approval. And also for subsequent years, we will be able to come, and we won't just spend the money, we'll come back to the mayor and council and ask for additional authority for outlying years.
And I'd just like to clarify, so I can see the reasoning that the councilwoman has brought up, and that is, just earlier you just talked about $1 million for Shea and possibly Saguaro. So those would be likely candidates for a different type of sealant. We call that a fog seal, and it'd be a different than slurry seal. So that would be something that would be coming back separately as a separate, depending on the recommendation that comes back, it's likely not going to be a slurry seal.
Correct.
I'm trying to understand, and I appreciate your patience. You have a contract here, it's like to spend $400,000 a year on slurry sealing. So there's a lot of areas. So this year, you're going to do a certain area for up to $400,000. The funds that you're going to use for that are carryover funds that haven't been used. So they're basically in the bank that you're asking us to say, okay, to use. But in the future, if you're going to spend another $800,000, where are those funds going to come from? Are they going to be part of the budget? But I just wanted to know, if you start this, where are the rest of the funds going to come through from in order to support it?
That's an excellent question, and you're correct. Some of the funding that we are spending this year is unspent or carryover funding from last year. Each year, we have a budget amount that is approved by the council, and that will happen here shortly. The intent is to spend as much of that money as possible doing the work we do. A good example is we overestimated what it would cost us to do our pavement management in regards to mill and overlay this year. As a result of not having to do as extensive amount of work and a less costly process, we now have funding left over in this year that was budgeted. So we're going to spend that on a different pavement management type or process. But each year historically contains unspent funding or carryover funding from the previous year, but we will only be allowed to spend the adopted amount that's shown in the streets fund budget for each year. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. So, and also, are you going to spend $400,000 a year, or is it just going to be 350 or whatever? I mean, you guys don't absolutely have to spend the full 400, right?
No, ma'am, we do not. What we want to do is we want to take care of the streets that are identified on the map, which are in the northwest quadrant of the town to the best of our ability. And it could take up to $400,000 to complete that if we have the funding available. We've got about a 2 or 3 week gap here between finishing one project and starting another one. So we're at least looking at $250,000 worth of work. But
Okay.
we certainly are not going to spend money we do not have.
Right, and so are you saying you're going to need the $1.2 million for sure, or you just don't, it's just going to be based on a year-to-year basis?
Each year we will come back to the mayor and council as part of our pavement management program and ask for permission to spend money on the different types of pavement management.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Do we have any speaker cards? No? Well, if there aren't any other questions, would somebody like to make a motion, please?
I'll move approval.
Second.
Okay, is that enough?
As written, right?
Yes.
As written.
All right, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed?
Aye.
Thank you, Jerry. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Our next item is consideration of joining Arizona Thrives. Grady?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. The item before you is a request to join this consortium of industry leaders and cities and a number of companies that are trying to look forward to developing a path toward achieving a healthy economy in Arizona as the state tries to transition to clean air and clean energy and low carbon emissions. The mayor and I both saw in our respective committees. With the mayor, it was the regional council meeting at MAG, and for me, it was the MAG Management Committee. There was a presentation that the executive director gave on this particular initiative. I was very impressed with it. The most important part is that that they're trying to find creative ways to have industry reduce our carbon footprint in the future. And we're seeing that every day right now. You know, more and more vehicles that are being sold are electric vehicles. A number of the utilities are going after clean energy, such as solar and wind. And so this is I think, a really good movement. The idea is to not only have a low carbon emissions, but also to try to create jobs that are in these industries. A number of leaders from SRP, Intel, the Arizona Commerce Authority, APS, Valley Partnership, and numerous others are involved in this. I have to tell you, initially when I was looking at this, I did have some skepticism because this was actually coming from the Nature Conservancy, so I wanted to make sure that there wasn't something there that I didn't see in the presentation. Nature Conservancy is a really good organization. It's not that I had questions about that, but I wasn't sure like what was the catch or what was the gotcha kind of thing later on. And talking to the proponent of this with the Nature Conservancy, it's very obvious what they're trying to do is trying to look at the long-term sustainability of the state and trying to do the right things as it relates to having low carbon emissions, clean energy, and trying to transition us to clean air. There's basically no financial commitments such as membership dues or annual fees. And there's not a requirement, for instance, for us to acquire our energy just from clean energy sources. So I think this is going to evolve over time, but from what I can see, I see really no downside to joining this initiative. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions the mayor and council may have.
Any speaker cards? So yeah, we were well informed and feel like this would be a good thing for us to join. So would anybody like to make a motion, please? On page 83.
Move to approve the town of Fountain Hills joining the Arizona Thrives Initiative.
I second.
Thank you. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Thank you. Motion approves, is approved. So our last item on this regular agenda is our legislative usual item. Brady?
Mayor and council, we talked a little bit about this at the beginning of the meeting. Probably the most pressing issue right now is the budget package that the legislature is considering, which includes a flat income tax, which would reduce tax collections that would be shared with cities and towns by about $525 million, of which would be about $1 million would be our share. At this point, they didn't have the call-in yesterday because there really hasn't been a lot of movement on other items. They're really focused on this just because of the huge impact. The mayor, do you want to share the op-ed that was in, I believe it was the
Capital Times.
Capital
Yeah, I
Times,
think so.
which was very
Well, it's
helpful.
just a good, yeah, it's, the Capital Times had an editorial by Senator Boyer, and so he seems to understand the ramifications of this. And then the league put out this, which everybody got it, so it has all of the information, and Bob, we could send this to you too, because I know you had put this in the paper, but you know, there's no any more action to take. I know Jerry spoke to one of our legislators. You did the letters, like you mentioned earlier, and so it's kind of a waiting game right now. Jerry, did you want to say anything?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I did have a chance to speak to one of our representatives and also emailed him, and he promised me that he would take a look at this in more depth this week or early next week and see if there's some solutions available for our town.
Thank you very much. We also, David Pock did a lot of work for us to help us figure out, you know, what we would need to do as far as retail activity in order to make up what we would lose from this, just because I know that we've all heard some folks telling us, well, you'll make it up because of the Wayfair decision, but you've probably all been able to read and see that that's not really the case at all. And the amount of activity that we'd have to have here in town would be something like almost 7% more total activity than we have now to make up for it. So it's, excuse me?
Sales tax.
Yeah, 34. The amount of money that we'd have to get out of sales tax would be very difficult, and for some, it's probably impossible, really. But anyway, so we'll just keep working on that, keep our eye on it. And as far as bills, I don't even know anymore, Grady.
Yeah, it
Aaron,
seems,
help me.
it seems like there's a lot of stalling going on. So there's really not a lot that the league reported back to us. So
Yeah.
we'll continue to monitor this, and hopefully by the next council meeting, we'll have more to report on either the budget package or any other bills that have been moving or have gone for signature.
Thanks. So the next item, of course, is our usual council discussion direction to the town manager. Is there anything for the good of the order? Why don't we take a adjournment? Do you want to take a break, or do you want to go straight into take a break? Okay, so let's adjourn. Can I get a motion?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We'll take a break and commence with the work study. Thank you, everyone. So I think we're ready to start with the work study, and there's Rachel ready to go. Thank you.
Absolutely. Mayor, Council, thank you for having us tonight. I appreciate your time. I know it's been a long night. This is the last item we'll go through. This has been a year-long effort to pull together our Community Services, Parks, Trails, and Recreation Master Plan. Tonight is a work session for you to ask questions, give us some feedback so that we can make any final changes to this plan and hopefully bring it back at a future meeting for your final adoption. Tonight we have Pat O'Toole from Greenplay. He is our consultant that's been working with us through this process. It was great to actually meet him in person. Everything has been virtual up to this point. He's going to go through the slides tonight. You do have a copy of the master plan draft in your packet. I hope you've had a chance to look at it. It is a doozy. It's about 150 pages, so it's not light reading. But if you did have a chance to go through it, you might hear some familiarity in that we've already started taking steps towards this plan, even though it's still kind of in the draft phase. You'll note that there's a call out for some additional staffing needs. We know that we've been talking about that at the budget level. You'll note that there's some call out for replacement of some of our park amenities. We're already underway with that. You guys have approved recent contracts for us to make changes to our playgrounds and upgrades. So you'll start to see some things that are familiar, and then this will also bring up future needs as we look probably about 10 years into the future. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Pat.
Let's ask something process-wise. So are we we're just going to speak, and then if we have suggestions, and then that comes back, or do you want us to actually vote on anything?
Actually, Mayor and Council, good question. Tonight is really just the presentation so that you can
Okay.
get your feet wet with the presentation in front of you. What they're planning on doing is there's about 43 slides, so we're going to try to get through it very quickly, and then save your questions, if you don't mind, to the end. And if there's anything that you see that you have some concerns or questions, what we want to do is we want to get this draft report finalized, and then with the recommendations, so we can make the changes when we come back to you the next time. It'll be ready for you to adopt. So we definitely want your input, we want your feedback, so that we can make this as productive as possible. So with that, I'll go ahead and turn it back over to the consultant.
But this is a work study session, and
Correct.
I just said move to direct, but we won't really do that then, okay?
It's actually that way in the event that there's something, let's just say there wasn't consensus or there were strong opinions one way or the other on some issue. It's that way so that at least we can leave understanding what the majority of the council wanted to do.
Okay.
So, well, just so you want all our input tonight, and then when it comes back, it's going to be the proposed final? Is that what you said?
So what we're really after is to see your reaction to this. And if for the most part you're satisfied, but let's say you want to tweak or make adjustments, let us know that tonight. And then we can come back and bring that with those changes to the report and the recommendations to the council at that time for the master plan.
Sorry, Pat, I know we were actually talking about this earlier. If you did read through it and you noted grammatical things or something that might need to be capitalized or things like that, editorial type things, those you can probably just send directly to me that we can make those changes in-house. This is more content driven, I think, for tonight. All right, away we go.
Great. Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Pat O'Toole. I'm with Greenplay. I'm a principal with Greenplay, and I've been the project manager for this project. It's been my pleasure. As Rachel said, it's been all virtual, so today I got to see your parks that I've just seen videos and slides of and relied on our local landscape architect. But very impressive city. Some of the discussions tonight was interesting. One of my comments today was, "There's no signs in this town. There's no billboards, and and no trash and all that." So anyway, kudos to you guys. Okay, as we talked about, this is going to be kind of a whiz bang. It's coming out of. In our report, we do have an executive summary in there. We are going to touch on all the basically the recommendations when we get there. I was going to come up here and say it's going to take, I'll hurry and get through it in about 3.5, maybe 4 hours. But if you need me to slow down, let me know. Other than that, we're going to cruise. I like good. So we're going to skip this one because this is what I'm going to talk about. Threw this one up here, and again, it's in the plan. I'm going to keep going back to that because I'm not going to read to you. This is our graphic that showed the steps we've gone through in the last year. Now we are ready. We are between 3 and 4, so we're actually in 3 presenting the draft plan. We'll be back for the final plan, whether that's, again, virtually or in person. We'll figure that out. If it's something where there's not too much more of what you're seeing tonight, sometimes that Rachel could come up here and say, we're ready to adopt. We made all your changes, blah, blah, blah. So something to think about. And then the important step is the implementation, which actually has already started as I saw it today going around. Just one summary slide on the demographics. Probably nothing that you haven't seen or known, but your population, median household size, median household income. These are all things that help drive our plan to understand your community. And then some of the things that we looked at from other park and recreation departments. And I'm kind of in between what I heard tonight about we want to hear what other cities are doing and maybe not so much, doesn't matter what they do. And I'm kind of a proponent of that as this is one tool to measure what are the people doing. But because they're doing it doesn't mean you have to do it. Because they have X number per thousand doesn't mean you have. But it is a tool to measure and see if there's somebody out there that, wow, how do they get all that done? There's some comparables out there. One thing, again, that came out of this comparable is there's one park for every 5,000 residents here, and we're seeing, one park for maybe 2,000 in other communities. Does that mean now you have to add those up and say we need 4,000, more? No. It's to listen and see what parts of town might make sense to do that, and to know that you're on the lower end, but pay attention to your capacities. Every 5 acres per thousand. Again, we're seeing up around 10, so you have half. But if people are happy, that's what you want to pay attention to. That's what this plan says. Is we're not saying go do this. We're saying this is one tool that we went out and looked at. One thing that again you've started to add to. 22.01 FTEs, we're seeing up to 40. So does that mean you need double? Probably not. But we do have some recommendations based on this as being one tool, but also now what did we see, how many programs you have, how satisfied people are, and the whole gamut. Inventory. Basically looked at your inventory. We did 2 different kind of sections on it. We looked at the overall park and rec system, and then we looked at individual facility assessments. Every component in every one of your parks, we went and looked at. When I say we, it was our local landscape architects with the local crew here, and then me participating virtually. But everyone got a grade, and a very simple grading scale, 1, 2, or 3, 3 being state-of-the-art, 2 being meeting your standards, probably doesn't need any assistance in this 10-year plan. 1, those are the things that need to be addressed as what we call low-hanging fruit, or low-scoring amenities is what we projected those as. As far as our upfront public input, we had 3 focus groups, 44 participants. We looked at all your previous plans, previous documents. Rachel and her staff downloaded on Dropbox, I don't know how many, but a ton of documents that we went through. We had 2 public forums via webinar, again, all done virtually, 77 participants, the site tours, and then we did a statistically valid as well as an online survey as another tool. The survey, looking at the methodology, mailed out 4,000 surveys, had 758 total complete surveys. 626 of those were the invitation, which is the statistically valid. So we really got it. We're looking for 400. So we got a lot more than that. And that 400 would give us a plus or minus 5% margin of error. We were able to narrow that down to plus or minus 3.9. What that means is if every household filled it out, we're within 3.9% of what they would say. Had 131 open link surveys. We opened it up to anybody in town to take that exact same survey. We tallied them differently, compared them, also found out that they were very close, which is very typical. Okay, some of the outcomes that came out of that. I'm gonna have to get my glasses out here, or off. 9 out of 10 respondents have used town parks in the last 12 months. That's unbelievable, that's 90%. 73% have attended a special event, 70% used trails and pathways. So your system's very well used. I will say one of the things that the trends we're seeing during the pandemic is kind of an overrun of outdoor facilities. Now everybody that never knew there were trails or whatever, they went out and used them and kind of liked it. So we're now seeing a big surgence of, now everybody seems to be an outdoorsman. So just something to keep in mind. Level of satisfaction. Most people are very satisfied, and 89% ranked at a 4 or 5 on a 5-point scale. Importance, Fountain Park, amenities of parks, trails and pathways, and special events were probably the top 4. And then communication. Email is the best method. What we ask is how does the park system communicate with you now, and how would you like to in the future? So email was the best method, and the activity guide and brochure and social media were also in there. And quite frankly, some communities find that not too many people, as you talk about now, everything's electronic, like or even use the brochure. Here it's the Bible. So it's a good resource, good use of dollars as far as marketing. Future needs, new special events, we heard that again tonight. Improved communication, additional adult classes and activities. Others that came up were youth, preteen, and teen. In terms of a farmer's market and greater trail and connectivity. So that whole idea of the trails are there, but now let's connect to communities and neighborhoods. Funding sources. More public and private partnerships, town council prioritizing more funding into the community services department. Support for a bond referendum or increased user fees is more mixed. So the top 2, and you'll see in the recommendations that we made, and again, depending on what we heard from folks, it depends on what the bond referendum is, depends on how much, depends on the time that we need to do that. So those are the 3 issues that usually will be a successful or non-successful bond. Increased use, improved communications, better condition of facilities, and more facilities and amenities were the top 3 things that people said would increase their usage. And we asked, what are the values and vision that we need to look at as we put this plan together? Accessibility, affordability, encouraging the active lifestyle, and promoting health, wellness, and fitness. Those were the top ones. Okay, the goals and objectives and action plan. Basically, the recommendations were drawn from all of our inputs. So it took us a year to put this thing together, looking at all what I call uncovering all the rocks, looking at everything you've got, and then kind of molding that into here's what we would see in your next 5 to 10 years to really be successful. All the costs, just FYI, that are in the plan are in this year. We don't have any projections on those. We allow you to do that. One thing about our plans is we like to say they're implementable because we've looked at your crossroads of that wish list that we heard and your resources to make it happen. We put them in 3 categories: short-term, mid-term, and long-term, about 3 years apiece. So you can kind of interchange those, and we're not saying what's your number 1 top priority. We're saying these right here are probably at the beginning of your plan. These are kind of mid, and these are long-term. Okay, the rest of the slides are going to look exactly like this. The other thing I told Rachel is I was going to start my presentation like the last guy did, where we just go click, 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 click. So We basically have 4 goals. And those goals in green, so every slide we'll get to the next goal, but we put them in categories: organizational, facilities, programs, and funding. The blue is the objectives. So I'm going to kind of focus on the objectives and the actions. So the action steps are in the left column. I'm going to let you kind of read through the capital cost estimate, the operational budget impact, and the time frame, which is the short, midterm, and long term. So again, any questions, or if you do want to wait till the end, make a note or something, and we can certainly circle back. So objective 1 was increase staffing levels between 3.5 and up to 6 full-time FTEs. That was kind of the sweet spot of what we saw happening. And in talking with Rachel today, you're looking at 2 at this point in time. So the groundskeeper, I believe, is one of them. And then we had the full-time park attendant, which is the second one, and also a full-time volunteer coordinator and a half-time community center executive and support person. That was in the midterm. The long term, additional 2.5 FTEs, including 1.5 for the recreation leader and site supervisor, half-time for special events and programmer, and a half-time for marketing and communications coordinator.
Just a real quick question. So I noticed there is a recommendation for a full-time equivalent volunteer coordinator. We have a current volunteer coordinator. So is this a second position doing the same work? Okay.
To get the work done that she can't get done. Next objective, improve all community services communication avenues to the public. The other thing I'll point out is in our report, we tied these recommendations to the strategic plan goals. So you'll see that next line on any of these that it occurs, which ones it does. Okay, the first action step, improve marketing, communication, distribution of, including email, the loop, social media, and local media. That was, again, what came out of what most people said. These are the best ways we want to be communicated with. We also matched that up with how many people said the reason we don't participate, we don't know what's going on. So you've got that mix in there. Continue to create a marketing plan that focuses on full and part-time residents. Create a strategic plan to define branding image and establish the amenity of the community services of Fountain Hills. So looking at that branding, to take it beyond just how you use our logo, but our signs look that way. Every park entrance looks that way. What is the branding so that people know, tying in even with your tourism, when they see that logo, when they see that, that's Fountain Hills. And then, of course, when you take them into videos and what have you, like we heard tonight. Okay, the next one, enhance existing volunteer program, continue to market and recruit volunteers, enhance communication, including the email. Oops, did I just do that one? Formalize the recreation program evaluation process. Determine, track, evaluate, and look at. So this will be a system that starts on the front end, tracks how these things are going. What's that life cycle of that program? Know when you need to rejuvenate it. Know when you need to know to let it go. Know when you need to know to add 4 more classes because it took off. Develop a long-range trails plan. Basically, to look at the trails plan from a regional perspective. How do you tie into existing trails in other communities as well as property that you don't own like you already have with some trailheads? Look at those connectivities to parks, neighborhoods, schools, attractions, sidewalks, all of the above. Great places for teen activities. Provide space for teen programs and activities within the community services facilities. Utilize the mayor, youth council, and youth commissioner on the Park and Rec Commission to formulate a teen advisory committee to help guide and create these activities and promote them within. Conduct a feasibility study to determine the need and support of a new aquatic and recreation center. Basically, to hire a qualified, unbiased consultant team that would come in and really do a feasibility study that focuses just on that. what should have in it, should you even do it at all, would it be successful, will people support it, what amenities would they like to see, what's it going to cost, to operate those types of things. Create a Safe Routes to Parks program, utilize it and implement a Safe Routes to Schools program, and you basically can just piggyback on that one, and usually there's spurs off of that Safe Routes to Schools that you can create that Safe Routes to Parks. Fund and implement existing wayfinding signage program, again, in the strategic plan tying into one of those tasks. Implement the existing wayfinding signage plan to improve directional signage to community services facilities. So that one is already in place. This needs to be funded and implemented. Repair, upgrade, and replace the low-scoring amenities from the inventory assessment. This is what I was talking about. And instead of listing them all here in the 10-year plan, we provide what we call a staff document of those low-scoring amenities. In our assessment evaluation, the scores are in there. We pull that out as a document so that each year you can look at your CIP plan. What are we going to bite off this year? What's most important? What might have deteriorated faster than other things? And that's why, again, some of the things have already been implemented. So we don't put it in a plan because we hope in the next 6 months, year, 2 years, it's outdated and obsolete because you're picking things off that list. So that's why you see a wide range in that capital score. It's all going to depend on, how much, what deterioration, how many you pick off, those types of things, and how you replace it. Implement long-term townside shade tree program and become Tree City certified. That was a goal that we heard a lot of. Assist the community in improving the farmers market. Work with the community organizations to determine if there's a good location, daytime, vendor support, operator, etc., to improve the farmers market. Understanding there's an awful lot of competition out there, and just assist in whatever ways that mixes and matches. Conduct a local survey to poll the vendors to participate in their desires. That was the number one key is, if we do this and have it here on this day at this times, who's going to participate if there's so many others that are a little bit larger out there. Create adventure park amenities in a park to create positive local and regional economic impact. Again, tying into that tourism. Design and adventure amenities such as zip lines, nature playgrounds, skate parks, nature obstacle courses, mountain bike skill. This is that outdoorsy, kind of that ninja warrior kind of mentality that we see. Not just kids, but families are getting into it now. And determine where that should be. So again, that could be in a future park down the road. Conduct a feasibility study to determine the need and support for a new environmental education center. Hire qualified, unbiased consultants team to, again, conduct that feasibility study to determine whether it is feasible to implement this, what types of programs would there be, who would operate it, where would it be located, how sustainable is it, those types of things. Another thing that came out a lot in our plan was to include the dark sky initiatives and natural areas as that, again, that tourism, local as well as local full-time resident, part-time resident, and tourism coming in.
I was going to ask you that, because reading through this, I really didn't get a feel for what this means, new environmental education. It seems like it's assuming I know what it means.
Okay. Environmental Education Center is basically a center where participants can go, families, all generations, and learn about nature. So you have nature programs. They will understand, ecology of what they're looking at. Can be, anything from a trail that is interpretive. In other words, you can get an audio based on your smartphone of what kind of plants you're passing, animals to look for, those types of things. And bringing it into a center is really where you can educate kids. You can tie it in with schools for their bringing their classes in there, all different ages. And it's usually one of the positions in Parks and Recreation for years. It's kind of like a park ranger, only they are educators. They've studied nature, and then they will teach people. Okay? Research opportunities for equitable access to park amenities for all residents. Continue to monitor and improve access to parks for all demographics in Fountain Hills. We heard a lot about maybe some people can't get to some of the areas. We look at access as, are there opportunities for people to go to places they want to go? Maybe their park in their neighborhood, for example, doesn't have anything that interests them, but can they get to other places? Update the playground replacement program. Again, large numbers over 10 years, replace and upgrade immediate playground equipment needs. This, again, has already started. I think next week you're going to replace one. So again, we've looked at each and every one of those and graded them, so they're somewhat in a priority list. Install outdoor fitness equipment in the parks, determine park and trail locations, types of outdoor fitness equipment to install. This again is another trend that we're seeing where you actually put cardio machines out there that are intended to be outdoors, where people can take walks. That you can stack them in an area where there's a nice view. You can put them every half mile if you want. Finalize the Fountain Park capital improvement plan to finish the Fountain Park CIP to include the priorities, cost timelines for needed repairs, and to really tie that into, as your flagship, the deferred maintenance. So as you look at stuff that has a life cycle, what's going to be coming down the pike, so you got a plan, and you can plan to fund that and not let that go downhill. Okay, now for the programs and service delivery. Increase additional program spaces and staffing and resources to create new programming. This is all around what we heard that people would like to see and how to develop that internally. Research, document, and track the availability of capacity in existing potential programs and spaces. Kind of that theory of don't create more bigger areas if you haven't filled what you've already got. How else can you develop that capacity? Evaluate and implement the best potential additional recreation program opportunities, including the resources and staffing necessary. So again, we've got a lot of research in here, as well as the staff constantly looks at what people are looking for, what they're interested in, and what they're responding to. Increase opportunities for additional special events. Again, heard that tonight. This is probably the top programming issue that people wanted to see. Create and recruit partnerships with event organizers, community organizations to bring additional events to Fountain Hills. So the idea is not to have to put these on strictly from the community services department, but from the community itself. Very difficult to do this, anytime you have particularly a large event. It takes some recoup time. You've got people working weekends and nights instead of days, and it's really difficult. The biggest thing that I see is when you're good at it, everybody wants you to do it. So let's just let them do it. The idea is to really bring this into it, to being a community, and again, we heard that in the tourism tonight, was let's combine and see what we can do together. If and when an aquatic facility is developed, ensure a full range of aquatic classes and programs. Again, research and evaluate and implement the best potential aquatic programming if this facility is going to be built. A lot of that information will come with that feasibility study. This is one thing we did hear quite a bit, is the need for this. Enhance year-round recreation programming is a priority. Increase the number of indoor rec programs and partner with other organizations. So this again is driving that aquatic center and that recreation center need is to have more year-round programming outside of what you can have as a capacity in the community center right now. Increase outdoor environmental education programs. Again, this is what was driving the Environmental Education Center. So again, through that feasibility study, do the research and evaluate who all would be interested in having programs in there is probably the biggest thing here, and who to partner with. Strategically schedule classes and activities to ensure access to all residents during times and days they're available. what we heard is a lot of times people work and there's not the programs that they like to see after work or on weekends, or for their entire family. Expand fitness and wellness programming. I'm not going to keep reading the research, evaluate, and implement. These are the different types of programs that we heard that people would like to see more of. And then the fourth goal, improve financial position. Consider additional financing opportunities for capital and operational funding, future growth, and improvement projects. These were the things that we heard that the public would support. Increase general fund budget, annual allocation from the city or the town council. Consider bond referendum for specific future capital projects, and increase user fees equitably in offering a cost recovery policy. So one that is kind of defendable and ties in with who gets the benefit of these programs. Second goal, establish increased funds for ongoing deferred maintenance, repairs, and replacement for existing facilities. Continually update a deferred maintenance and equipment replacement plan based on the life cycle, so you kind of know what's coming down the pike. Verify all facilities are future funded to ensure repairs, replacement, and improvements, quality increase, the longevity and safety of existing resources. One thing that we heard, and we typically do hear it in most plans, is let's fix up what we got now before we take on anything else that might get in a condition that we can't take care of. Establish a cost recovery and resource allocation philosophy and policy. Again, to create a cost recovery and resource allocation philosophy and policy to create equitable and defendable user fees based on benefits and value to who receives those. Utilize partnerships and other service providers in the community to improve those existing partnerships and to create new partnerships to help pull off this plan. Develop a scholarship program to ensure equitable access to all facilities and activities. Develop a support and funding of a scholarship program within the business community to ensure affordability to all residents. So again, kind of like the school lunch program, you can piggyback on that, get businesses involved into, sometimes it's a very small, $100 a year that creates a pot that you can then publicize a list and say, here's all the partners that helped us make sure we didn't turn any kids down or any families down for programs. Whew. There's my 4 hours and I don't know how many minutes, but this is just our next steps. Again, I've circled the draft and final plans. So again, something that was in the report and our proposal. So we're basically at the end of the process. With that, we'll take any questions. And then I think from our perspective, what we're looking for is one set of comments, edits, typos, whatever, from Rachel. So whatever you guys want to do tonight. But I just want you to not feel like if you don't say it tonight, it's lost and we're going to leave with, the train's leaving without you.
Thank you. Questions or comments? Alan?
Thank you for the presentation. Was this a result of a written survey or a telephone survey or?
It was a written and an online survey.
Written and online.
And that document is a standalone document. It's pretty good size. Includes also every comment that was made. It has all the charts and graphs in it. What we typically do, so this final report that already is big enough isn't like this wide, provide that as a staff document. And we'll pull out some of those charts that you'll see in here that are the ones that really told us maybe the recommendation should be made in that. But to answer your question, it was a mailed out survey with a one-time code that you could get online, or you could fill it out, hard copy, and send it back to our sub-consultants that do surveys. And then we took that same survey, put it online, and advertised it as much as we could, or as much as Rachel could, and then they filled that out. And then we separated them, so you'll see in that document which ones are the invite surveys, which is the mailed statistically valid, and which ones are the online, and how they compared.
Several times you mentioned, quote, "the public supports." Do you have the ages of the respondents? How do you define public?
We do. I didn't bring the...
I don't need to write this minute. I was
Okay.
just asking if you have.
Yes, we have the demographics of who filled out the survey. We have the questions in there. So when we say this public supported, like supported funding, we said, how would you like to see, of the things that you would like to see happen, how would you support funding? And we put the ones in there, and there was, I don't remember the percentages, but I'm thinking, like 70% in that area were the top ones we saw. And then, as we said, there's some mixed in the bond referendum and the user fees. But likewise, asking them what programs they'd like to see that aren't available, what facilities, existing need to be improved. But it's pretty comprehensive.
To help us as any kind of a roadmap, and I'm not sure this is your job, we'd have to update this with what we've already done or are doing. For example, you mentioned branding, and you said long-term, which kind of puzzled me. Our Strategic Planning Advisory Commission right now is looking at branding. So if we were to put together any kind of a roadmap, the other thing is, you said branding long-term. Is that something the survey respondents said, or you're saying?
That was, the branding is something we recognize that should happen. Obviously, your strategic plan also mentioned it. And I think what we looked at is your strategic plan is maybe a citywide branding. And now how do you take that citywide branding and create a community services branding?
So to your point, Councilmember, what I saw was really they're looking at trying to create this identity for Community Services Department. And so they're using that term branding for that, but it's, they also will be working in conjunction with what we're trying to do with SPAC and on, health, wellness and all that.
And I'll be honest with you, some of the long-term things were because of the amount of staff you have. There's only so much that they can do outside their daily jobs to make this plan happen.
Well, Rachel can do it all.
That's right. I put her name on everything, and she took it off.
All right, thank you. Thank you.
Just to add a little bit of context to that, the last part of your question is a roadmap. You heard Pat mention the department has a strategic plan that's supportive of the most current strategic plan that the town has. I know we're working on a new one. That right now is acting as our roadmap. It's kind of that 3-year short term. And then as we sort of check those off, it's a valid plan through 2023. We'll use this to kind of create that next set of 3-year goals and roadmap that based on the recommendations that are here, based on our current economic climate, based on hopefully the fantastic wellness we'll have by that time, in kind of any other considerations that might be going on in current affairs at that point. So we'll use that sort of as our road mapping system.
Grady, did you have something?
Yeah, I want to just kind of wrap this up and just kind of put this into the context. So the council has seen, we've had a voter-approved general plan. And so John right now and his staff and other departments that have their elements in there are working on trying to implement those components. We have the strategic plan, and in the past you have seen items in the strategic plan. I'll give you an example, the feasibility of the charging stations. Well, not only did we evaluate the charging stations, but we went ahead and made that happen. So what's going to happen going forward? Obviously tonight you're not going to be asked to approve this tonight, but going forward, assuming the council likes what they see, and if they want to make some tweaks or adjustments, they can do that. But going forward, you're going to see when you receive budgets and budget requests, they're going to tie back to the plan. Of course, my job is, as your manager, is to help balance the needs of what community services needs and the parks and recreation and the trails, but also with the resources that we have. and also the competing other departmental needs and other council priorities and the strategic plan. So this is going to be very helpful. And, we're going to have to work in the context of our resources that we have available to fund these. But just an example, we're already kind of ahead of the curve. You saw in the budget workshop last week that we had a full-time park attendant, and we also had an additional groundskeeper position. So, and was there anything else in your request, I think, in the short term? Anyways, the point is, we're already kind of striving towards some of these because they were overlapping with our budget process, and that did enter the budget process. So I just want to kind of conclude that from my perspective. By the way, this was a knockout job. Great job, Rachel, and to you as well, and to all the people that had some input into this process, because I'm very impressed with this. I've seen these in other cities, and this is probably the most comprehensive one I've seen. Most of them are just parks master plans or recreation master plans or a trails master plan. We have all three. So this is a very comprehensive plan that is going to cover all three areas.
I would also like to say, kudos to Rachel and her staff. So all those midterm, short-term, long-terms, this whole plan's been vetted with them. Now we wanted to vet it with you. For example, the two new positions were in midterm. You were supposed to wait till 4 to 6 years. That's going to happen. And that's why we don't say priority number 1's this, priority 2's this, because you get to 3 and you don't get it done, everything else stops. It goes on a shelf. What we want is these last pages that I just showed you dog-eared over the next 5 to 7 years. And depending on what you have done, do another plan just like this, because we're real close on the first 5 years here, and then we vision a little bit on the 5 to 10. And I think if we erred anywhere, and I don't want to even call it erred, we tended to push it because of resources, so that you could get some wins, celebrate some wins, and not think if you didn't do everything in the short term in 3 years, oh my God, the plan's worthless. So celebrate those things, adjust it, dog-ear it, make notes in it, cross out now your midterms, I just need 1 more, and then the long term, we need 3 more. And that's that roadmap. And when I talk roadmap, it's not here's your road. It's if that's blocked off, here's all the other routes you can get there. It might take you a little longer, might take longer time, but you can get there.
All right, well, I have more than a few things, but I guess I'll just start at the bigger picture. I mean, it's an ambitious plan, like ambitious, but I appreciate your comments kind of putting in perspective, because I think two giant words kind of stick out throughout this whole thing is staffing, funding, and of course with us being up here and the constraints that we're under in terms of our funding and our general fund and our annual budgets, where half the money is right to public safety, boom, and streets have dominated the conversation for quite a number of years already, and we still have a long road to go, so to speak. And so, I'm number 1 Parks and Rec guy, but, a blanket statement like, the council needs to allocate more general fund money to Parks and Rec. It's just like something's going to have to give on the other end to do that. So, and I know that's our job going forward, but, and passing bonds for capital projects is one thing, but then funding the M&O for those things is another thing. See, big picture, I was surprised, but maybe not surprised that Aquatic Center came up as much as it did. It's been debated out here about 20, 30 years as well. And so, I'm not surprised recreation-oriented people would bring that up. I'm just curious, is the feasibility study you described to kind of get our minds wrapped around that project seems pretty extensive to me, and that sounds expensive in terms of even trying to get to a point of if we want to pursue that. So I'm pretty leery of that, just based on my experience out here and the reaction we've gotten throughout the years from the community. So I'll just leave it at that. I do like the greater trail path connectivity is requested by the community. I like that a lot, and we've been talking about that a little bit. On the list of parks and such, and I know Rachel's probably going to roll her eyes, but I know Kiwanis Park isn't, a town park per se, but there is acreage there. There's 2 basketball hoops, 2 picnic ramadas, potential for sand volleyball. So I don't know if that's technically should be on the list, but to me, it's an amenity that this community has that maybe should be included.
As of right now, we don't maintain those.
Correct?
areas. So
Yes.
if we decide to include those into our area of, as part of our system, recognized part of our system, then yes, absolutely. I think that's a great option.
Well, maybe we should consider that. Just, okay. All right, feasibility study is done. There was a number in here, and I know it didn't come from either one of you two, but it said that 61% of our residential properties are basically seasonal or temporary. That sounds high to me, 61%, and I thought James had a different number in one of his reports a while back from the economic development side as far as like 50 or 40%. 61 to me just sounds really high, but I don't know if that makes a difference.
I know that Mr. Smith's left, but we can certainly try to research that and get an answer back to you and the council.
Yeah.
And Mike, I asked about that earlier too, because it's 61.5. And one thing that does come to mind though is our registered voters are 18,000 or so. So obviously, even if people are occasional or seasonal, a lot of them must be considering this their home. So that was
Okay.
just one other
Yeah.
aspect of it.
So I guess if they're here 9 months or and gone 3, they're still kind of full-time, I don't know. But I think the results too kind of showed, it's talking about the aging kind of demographics out here and the boomers and the emphasis on wellness and health and all that kind of stuff. And I think that bodes well to some of the planning we're doing at the community center in terms of either expansion or modification. So I think that is kind of a reaffirming thing for me in terms of what we're doing. But again, I'm still torn between, I was talking about teens and a teen center and more activities for young people. And can our community center really be a be-all, end-all for all generations? I'm still having a hard time wrapping my head around that. And I think, one of the actions was improve Boys and Girls Club existing partnership. I mean, they had or have a teen center. I know they've tried over the years. They have a facility there. I just think we should explore that more from a town perspective of partnering somehow or being a part of that or using their facility, whatever. I know we do some collaboration, and I know it's been tough and not tough over the years depending on different, directors and leadership on their end and our end and that kind of thing. But I just think, we need to kind of figure out where that's going to be and where the resources, if we're going to devote time and effort to that demographic or to younger people. I mean, can we, throwing a couple of video games and a vending machine in the community center, is that really going to, cut it for, the families and younger people that you're talking that we want to attract? So I don't know, just think we, need some more help there. Yeah, and I questioned the volunteer coordinator thing too, because I thought she was full-time, and I'm like, well, maybe she's half-time, but I don't know about that in terms of, I don't know what the time frame was on that, but it seems like we're not going to need a second one for a while, so that's just my comment on that.
Actually, that actually references back to our budget request earlier this year with our staffing. We do have a full-time volunteer coordinator, you're absolutely right, who is fantastic and has done a fantastic job picking up right where our previous one left off. That being said, we also have a part-time home-delivered meals specific person. The idea would be to eventually move that that part-time home delivered meal staff into potentially a full-time role that supports the volunteers as a whole. So less specific to one program and more comprehensive.
Okay. So that might be more just a personnel issue than.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay.
I have a question. Speaking about teen and teen center, you are suggesting additional employees, et cetera. We're trying to build up our teen center and, engage them in the community and stuff. Is there going to be like a teen counselor at any point in time that would kind of be a director, for the teen center per se, if it's going to be built up?
Well, I think right now the goal is a little less teen center and more just trying to improve the options in terms of programming. What do we do currently for teens, and how can we incrementally improve that with what we have currently in terms of staffing? We do have 2 full-time coordinators that are specific to recreation, and they sort of divvy up whether they do youth, whether they do tots, whether they do seniors, they do type of programming. So where I believe the effort would be placed is adding additional programming that is specific to teens, whether it's a teen night every, I don't know, 3rd Friday, something of that nature, to where Councilman Charnot was mentioning, do we do that in partnership with the Boys and Girls Club? Do we use the community center as that resource location? And then eventually, if that blossoms and grows, do we look as the next plan as part of a permanent teen center or something of that nature? I think some of the participation numbers and how that goes will help dictate kind of where that path goes as well. Does that answer your question? Great, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And then develop a long-range trails plan like that too, kind of ties into what we've been talking about. And I was curious, and I don't want to get into it tonight, but I don't know, with the state trust land, I don't know if they're even allowed us to look into, using trails on their property. I know they kind of no trespassing kind of a thing, but.
That's a pretty common thing to have. You call them a license agreement, basically, with the state agencies for the use of their land, understanding it would be temporary until it developed. So that can be something we certainly can look at and explore with the Arizona State Trust Land Department.
Yeah, I mean, especially if development is long ways off or never going to happen. I mean, I'm half a block from, state trust land, and back in my younger days, did a lot of mountain biking out there. There's a ton of trails and existing roads already out there. So I think it would behoove us to kind of tie that into our existing plan, or just create a whole new system out there. If we, allowed to do that, I think that would be awesome. And then, they talked about creating adventure park amenities, outdoor, ninja stuff, whatever. I think there's already a bike pump track in McDowell Mountain Park. There's 3 sport or mountain bike courses at McDowell Mountain Park, and I don't know if we need to promote those more. I just don't know if those types of facilities are really needed here, given the nature of what's already existing in McDowell Mountain Park, just adjoining to our northern borders. And I know it's a whole separate entity and jurisdiction, but I just can't see this town spending so many dollars on these types of things where some of these could be installed or whatever up at the park. Same with the nature center, the educational center. They have a little station there already where there's a ranger, and she does different things with kids and stuff. So either help that along or piggyback on that or something, rather than kind of going out, out on our own on something like that. To me, that's kind of a duplication. And then it talked about creating equitable and defendable user fees. And, we just went through that whole user fee study, and they're going to adopt it July 1. So, I know, again, you're saying, well, look long range, and, some of these things we've done already. Well, I think we've kind of done this right now. We're not going to visit that anytime in the near future. So I think that's it. Sorry.
Thank you, Mike. I wanted to ask Rachel, just we've had people ask us about bocce courts or Spartan training areas or adult playgrounds or whatever, and exercise stations. And I know some of our hesitancy has been, well, we're waiting to get kind of a feel for what our master plan would be. Do you see this as helping you be able to make these decisions along the way as some of these facilities or amenities are presented?
I do think it's a great piece to help us guide that. So, for instance, you probably heard multiple times in here that health and wellness and that are a priority for our community, and then trending are these workout facilities and exercise equipment in the parks. So that sort of looks like a very positive direction for us to look into in terms of where would that go, how would that work, how could we maintain that, how could we look at funding that, how could we consider that, in terms of our overall system, and then being able to kind of take, which I think this is a great plan because it really does look at a big picture in an objective format, where then we get to, as the staff and the leadership of our council, get to look at it and go, okay, great, where does this make sense for us? Does this make sense for us? It doesn't necessarily mean that we have to do everything that's in this plan. If we decide that a pump track isn't the right fit for us because McDowell Mountain Park has something close by, great. We've given it some consideration and bypass that. Same thing with whether it's a bocce court or it's a fitness area or a Spartan training area. We want to hear what our community wants, and that's kind of what this is, and then taking that into consideration with all of our other factors, funding being one, location and availability being others, and using our staff input and our leadership to say, does this make sense for us? We're hearing this is what they want. Does it make sense? Do we have the means to do it? I think that's where we'll have to kind of weave those together. So
This is a help for you, now it feels like a direction or a big picture. Talking about money and teens, and also you had, in the report it mentioned the linear park. So First Friday's kind of a thing. Could be for adults, but could be also something that kids might want to do. We have a few more things happening there besides just drinking or whatever, but there's food and music. That could be something that could take in some of the stuff that they talked about with the linear park, and also events. Is there any thought of anything being a moneymaker for us? Like, do we have any enterprise or franchise interest or anything that in creating a new amenity would actually make money for us? I think we've talked about the pool probably not being something like that, but would there be anything like that that could end up being an enterprise for us?
I think that's a great question. I think we would probably need to, there is a funding exercise that Pat worked with us on that is part of it, the plan that shows sort of what reasonable options we might have for alternate funding. And it was very comprehensive. It was pages long about, would the town consider doing this or doing that? In terms of an actual amenity, I think we'd need to figure out at what point would we need to do that. Is it I know we know a pool is probably not a financial moneymaker. It's probably not even a break even, but it's a resource for the community. Much like our events. Our events generally aren't moneymakers either. They are, resources for our community. Even the community center as a whole isn't a moneymaker. So that being said, we would have to probably look at that pretty critically to see how that would work and how that model would work for us.
Just one last thing, the neighborhood park aspect. So in trying to lure certain family members to move back here, one of the things that we can't really compete with is the idea, well, I live here and I have this park right here where I just have to, little tiny kids can get on a tricycle and we can go to the park. So I know how you had the acreage and you had the number of parks per people, and we don't have to comply, but I think that's a pretty good goal, if possible, would be to have that, because that would go hand in hand with attracting maybe more younger families too.
It's a good point. In fact, if you look at the very end of the report, it shows basically prospective park locations. Also, I think if the state trust land ever develops, we're a very unusual community because most communities that built in the 90s or even a little bit earlier had requirements for developers to put in these neighborhood parks, and we don't have any neighborhood parks that were really ever put in. So I think the option, or going forward, I think the alternative is really to try to get the state trust land when that develops all 1,300 acres, that the neighborhoods there do have neighborhood parks, and maybe one more community park in that area. And so that might be the opportunity for some of these amenities that might be amenities that we can't afford ourselves or don't have in the other parts of our parks, that we can work with a developer to put those in and make it attractive for families to want to buy and move in there.
A couple of things. First, community center and working it with various age groups. I think the key to remember is you're going to have your seniors that are going to want to work it or be there during the workday. Then your older children, your teenagers will be there later in the day. So if we extend community center hours, then you have the opportunity to hit all the age groups at the different times of day. That was one of the things we did as gym owners, was we had the early morning people, then we had our senior people were the next group in line, then you had your lunchtime worker-outers, and then they went back to work. Then in the evening, you had the after-work people. So it's, by opening longer, you have the ability to attract more usage for the different age groups. So that's the first thing I wanted to talk about. The second thing was, I believe I saw somewhere that we can use a grant to fund some of these studies that we were talking about. Like, I think the pool can be funded by a grant if, you can find a grant for it.
Therein lies the catch, is finding the grant for it. So. I'm not volunteering. Fair enough. I think we have a very engaged commission that is interested in pursuing and knowing more about the aquatics options. But yes, I think therein lies the catch, is yes, grant funding would be ideal. However, it's locating and securing said grant would be the start of that.
Okay, so the things that we talked about, do you want, if we have any other ideas, do you want us to just sort of funnel them in and?
Yeah, so I
Rachel?
think that's a really good idea. So if you, after reading the report more or the presentation, actually, if you look at the back of the report, the presentation that you had, the tables are actually in the back of that report. So if you see something there, like Mike did a really good job of enumerating his concerns or questions, do the same thing, and we'll try to get ourselves ready to bring this back for your consideration and adoption.
Sounds good. Sure.
Not to drag this out, but I was curious, I was surprised the farmer's market is an issue. I'm not quite sure
Me too.
if that's Parks and Rec or if we should even get involved in that at all. I just find that very curious if that's even a thing. But.
That was a topic of discussion for the staff as well. I think what we're hearing, and again, remember that a lot of these are driven by public comment, not necessarily the staff level. But a lot of the public comment is that they want a farmer's market on Saturday mornings, which is a common time. Unfortunately, we don't usually have the ability to attract a farmer's market because there's so much demand in other larger communities, whether it's Scottsdale or Gilbert or wherever. Those large communities have large farmers markets. Well, most of these small vendors can't be two places at once. So we're sort of stuck in that rock and hard place. And yes, there is a farmers market that operates on Thursdays on the Avenue. Again, however, it is small. It's only during the morning hours where those that have traditional, 9-to-5s aren't able to utilize it. I think that's where that comment is coming from. Now, what we want to do about it as a town would be up for discussion, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if you had a fair number of comments about it, you felt they had to be included in the report, but it's kind of like, I mean, we all want a Costco and a Trader Joe's up here too, but it just ain't going to happen, so,
That's why that recommendation is very carefully worded. To partner with what might happen and not be responsible. Can I make just some comments of what you guys have said for the good or whatever? Just, 'cause this is what I do. I have a passion for this. This is what I do for a living. I was a park and rec director my first 40 years, doing what Rachel's did at 4 different agencies. So I get the funding. The list that is put together that we provided Rachel, and we looked at it almost as a process of elimination of funding and which ones are, maybe more palatable than others. That's my list of doing this since 1979, of every way I've seen a park and rec department fund themselves. And when you ask what can make money, Grand Junction, Colorado found out that marijuana tax, supported by our survey at 94%, it was a sin tax, but it built them all the things that were in our plan. That's not for everybody. But it is for a lot of, lottery, casinos have gone through their cycles of taking that money and putting it towards schools or kids or whatever. But what I'd like to say is I hope this plan doesn't focus on just funding and staff. I'd like to pull that partnership up and that volunteer up, because that's what it's all about, is this plan. There's not a teen center in there. It's that multi-generational use that we're finding. Daytime seniors, the blue light special's on at 3 o'clock. The kids come in after school. They don't need the video there. They don't want it there unless you're big time into esports, which is a trend. But to come hang out, to do homework, to do what they can't do at school, and carve those hours out without saying, okay, seniors, you have to leave because they're coming in. I've been in 4 now situations that had a senior center that, one of them was in Pearland, Texas, in Houston, right across the street from the high school. Beautiful, brand new center, said senior center. And I told the director, I said, I bet you take senior off that within a year. Because what had happened is the kids volunteered to go over and teach the seniors technology after school for those that wanted to hang around. And it was after hours because they closed at 3. And then when we came in, we asked the question, what can the seniors teach you? Well, my mom can't cook. My grandma can cook. I want to know how to can. I want to know how to quilt. I want to know how to sew. Without any direction, without it being a formal program, after school, there was this involuntary sharing between teens and seniors. Pool tables. I remember, I don't know, in the 90s going out here in Red Mountain area. Everybody wanted this mega center. It was going to have a senior wing. It was going to have a teen wing, open to the public, adult wing, and they couldn't afford it. So we talked about what's in these things. You're having 3 different game rooms. You have 3 different fitness. You have 3 different, they all use them at different times. Nobody liked to do it, but what we found out was the seniors objected to the teens because they didn't want them touching their stuff. So we started putting in lockers. Lock up their bingo wheel and their cards, they're fine. So these centers, when I walked in, I go, if you build a teen center, it would look just like this. Physically, the activities are different. So all of a sudden, you can turn those things by extending hours, by some square footages, so that, the other thing we find is when you ask when we hear teens need some activities, it's coming from parents. You go talk to teens, there's a reason we have that teen council in there, because the teens said, I'm not going to do that. That's why teen centers are no longer there. But when you put the teens in charge of a space for programs that your peers can come to, and if you want a band, how much are you going to charge? That's when they're successful. Because if you try to do it for them, the first time there's a incident where the police are called or the cool kids don't go anymore, nobody goes. So there's a lot of things in here that are based on a lot of our knowledge of what can happen. It's going to happen differently here than in Pearland. It's going to happen differently here than in a lot of areas. But when we try to make those resources meet, that there's a reason you're to expand that volunteer program We tested it. Well, we're doing about all we can do. But to grow that, those are staff people that you don't have to pay. They are your ambassadors to go out there and sell your new families coming in. So anyway, I just wanted to pull some bits and pieces out there as you look at the plan. And we are certainly looking to finish this up in one that is believable to you guys, doable. But keep in mind, we didn't do everything just was a slam dunk. We want to stretch you a little bit. And hopefully that stretching becomes your future of, that Parks and Rec. I've been this long enough. We used to be down here in that pecking order of funding of quality of life. Now we're right behind police and fire almost everywhere because they've moved places because of schools, parks, and safety. And if you kind of keep that in mind, that's where maybe this can rise a little bit here, a little bit here, a little bit here, to get to where at least what I saw today, you're in great shape. It's not like you're falling apart. So anyway, I'll get off my soapbox.
Thank you. And tell us what you really think. No, I really appreciate that very much. So are we all good? Thank you so much. Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you.
Can we get a motion to adjourn? Second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Thank you.